Okay, the live thing is on.
It's on now, thank you.
What?
I was saying, Lindsay's a match.
I am. And I love it. You have such a hard time switching between the two?
Boy, I bet,
Yeah, but I might have been fast moving to Android though. My work phone, if it's ringing, I just turn it on its face and it stops. You just swipe down and click the button to turn the ringer off. This one is just not like that.
Were you at soccer?
I was.
yeah.
They were winning 8-3 when I left.
Ooh, where were they playing?
Just over here.
Yeah.
It's a natural, got women's blood.
It's really tough to leave a soccer game, isn't it?
Oh, that's why I'm like 6:58.
Running.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So fun.
Oh, nice.
Are we already streaming, Les?
Yes.
Yeah, and we're not muted? Okay.
Good.
I'll let you guys get all set up. All right. We'll call the meeting to order at 6:59. And then I'll just go through our territorial acknowledgement. The town of Colhurst is located in traditional Blackfoot Confederacy territory. We honor the Blackfoot people and their traditional ways of knowing and caring for this land, as well as all Indigenous peoples who have helped shape and continue to strengthen our community. All right, so first we'll start out with the adoption of the agenda. Would somebody like to make a motion to adopt the agenda? Councilor Evans?
I move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried, thank you. And then we'll go on to the minutes. Oh, sorry, I missed the minutes. We're doing this a little backwards today. I guess I should look at the agenda when we're doing it. Okay, so let's do an adoption of the previous minutes. Anyone like to make that motion? Councilor Florence?
I move that the adoption of the minutes of the ninth regular meeting, held April 19th.
Any discussion? All in favor? Oh, did you have a discussion?
Oh, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So two things. So one, just on my report, I was wondering if we could include the policy bylaw review committee. And then I just had a question about the two agenda items that we added. So it's currently still in correspondence in the minutes, but since we pulled it up to discuss, would the minutes have to further reflect that, or would it stay in correspondence?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in regards to our first question about the policy bylaw minutes, we don't put those ones in the minutes because basically there is separate reports from those individual committees.
Okay.
So we only do like ORSCs and Green Acres and sort of outside ones.
Okay.
And in terms of the moving the agenda items, I guess because of the fact that there was no real, there was discussion, but we put them in correspondence on that basis. But if you want, as it turned out, there were no motions or anything that came out of it necessarily. So
Okay.
I just put them as correspondence to move it there.
Okay, I wanted it to reflect that we had those conversations, but it was still in correspondence, so I just wanted to make sure that was okay.
Great. Any further discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Now I will follow the agenda perhaps today. All right, so we don't have any delegations. Where's our friend Stan? Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With council's approval, I guess, we had talked to you about an item there, and so I had Kevin, our Director of Operations, here to present his report and perhaps talk about the other item we talked about last week there. So generally, we would put him in the delegations or in that area if possible,
Okay.
just so we can carry on if he chooses.
What would you prefer? Would you prefer me do it under delegation or under reports? Does it matter?
when we do the minutes, we call it reports or whatever. but
Okay,
Generally, we put, if I knew he was coming for sure,
Yeah.
then we would have put him there, but as things go
All right.
later, we just put him out.
we'll add you on
Awesome.
there. Okay, so we're turning it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just go through my report first. Item one is planning stages for the 2022 roads and sidewalk repairs, and also crosswalk painting. I was quite concerned today, I couldn't find any crosswalk paint. I managed to piggyback with the city of Lethbridge on a shipment they have coming from Edmonton. So we did, because last year it was hard to find because of COVID, it's scarce. Advertising for summer work positions have closed, and I'm in the process of interviews and hiring for the positions. Solar project at the wastewater treatment facility is nearing completion. Panels are installed, the fence around is completed. Final electric connections have been done, and we have the electrical inspector out today. We're just waiting for Fortis to come and approve everything before we throw the switch and go live with that. All fire extinguishers in town buildings, trucks, equipment have been recertified till May 2023. Superior Trucking Calgary has received their new garbage truck. Had a couple of conversations on a couple of little items to change before pre-delivery inspection is completed, and then it'll be shipped to New West Truck in Lethbridge, and they'll do the chassis pre-delivery inspection. We're expecting to get the truck this month, so that's exciting. Staff have completed the annual sanitary lift station cleaning, which involves pumping down the lift station to be able to get into the vaults, remove debris from the pump, electrical lines, ladders, use a vac truck to remove grease, and we typically do this once a year. Staff have been replacing damaged benches and tops on some of the picnic tables at Miners Memorial Park. Just had some cracked tops over the winter damages, fixing up, that kind of thing. Some other things that we've been working on are replacing damaged street signs, straightening street posts, cleaning park fence lines, and continuing with tree pruning. Working on a schedule for the sanitary gravity main video camera inspection cleaning. What I try to do is do everything in a 5-year rotation. Sometimes it goes to 6 years, but we do send a camera through every sewer line in Lethbridge every 6 years. This is just to check the sewer lines for any cracking, lateral cracking. We did find one once, which would have been catastrophic. It was the main leaving down, and just on a routine camera, we found that it was ready to fall apart. So we replaced it before that happened. We do clean the lines when we do that if necessary as well, from buildup and blockages. Typically, it is the preventative maintenance, and it's worked well for us. I don't recall a sewer backup in our mains for a number of years, so it's worked well for us. Been working on our drinking water operation with the drinking water operations specialist from Alberta Environment and Parks. Basically, what we're working on is one of my items in my emergency response plan is low chlorine residual from the city of Lethbridge and how we would handle that. The likelihood is very low. We've only, since 2006 that we've been on the city of Lethbridge water, we've only had one instance where it was a concern. But I do try to have a plan for every foreseeable possible event. So I'm working with a fellow from the Lethbridge office on that. Final preparations are complete. I've arranged for equipment for spring cleanup. It's scheduled to begin on May 25th. And some other things we're working on are starting up irrigation systems in the park, cleaning and maintaining, getting the park washrooms ready to open, cleaning up the David Avier social area and the campground, reconstruction of the irrigation system at McDermott Park. When we put the posts and chain around there, no matter what alignment we took, we were hitting irrigation lines. They are kind of really crooked down the sides. So we're gonna have to replace about half of the irrigation lines in that park. Some other things we have to do is every 3 months, we have to flush and test the air relief valves on the sanitary sewer line. And every 2 years, I pull the ones on the water supply line from the city of Lethbridge. that's pretty much where we're at with Public Works. What I did pass around as well was an item here, looks like this. This is one page out of our drinking water safety plan, which was, I think, brought to your attention with the inspector's report from Alberta Environment. And this is one of about 35 pages, I believe. Just to kind of give you an example, we go through and we plot our risks, what the hazards are, and then it's put on a monitor, or on a likelihood and consequence score. It's to mitigate risks on our water system. The reason I picked this page is the top item. That is the only key risk that we have left in the whole document. We've been working on eliminating them. This one is a big one, and with previous councils, what we had discussed and considered is when the Walker subdivision is built, at the far south end, we would run a second line under the highway, or look at doing that. The biggest risk we have is a leak under the highway on our water system, because it would be a long time to fix that, and it would be catastrophic for the town's water supply. So having a second crossing for emergencies under the highway would give us some redundancy, and the farther south it is also takes that portion of the line. If there's a problem there, we can reroute emergency on the emergency line while we repair that. So it takes a good chunk of our supply from that region, gives us some redundancy. But that's pretty much, this is a network risk page, and then there's different risk areas for treatment in the homes, lead testing, all those kind of things. So kind of gives you an idea. Typically, I haven't brought the entire document to council, but if you would like to see it, we can do that. Review it each year. We go through each item, look at if there's anything further we can do to mitigate the risk even more. That's pretty much what that document is. I don't know if you have any questions. It's a lot of information.
It is, thank you for this though. So when I'm looking at the risk score for some of the other items, if we were to look at that secondary line, would that reduce the risk of the other items we've identified?
No, there's always going to be some risk, and it is a judgment call what we mark them as at.
Okay.
Like for example, the fourth item down is loss or supply of water quality as a result of a broken main. The hazard is loss of supply, chemical contamination, microbiological contamination. As a result of the broken main, when it's depressurized, ground soils and microbes in the dirt can get into that line. So there'd be a lot of flushing, you'd superchlorinate, all those kind of things. That one has a risk score of an 8. So, medium likelihood. The consequences, typically if a water main bursts and we don't depressurize it, we can keep it pressurized until we excavate down and clean around the pipe. So nothing can get back into the pipe when we actually do shut it off. So what you'll see sometimes when there's a water main leak is there's water bubbling out of the ground and everyone's going, well, why haven't they shut it off yet? Because the second we isolate it, it'll back pressure and pull contaminants into that pipe. So we leave it pressure until it's excavated, and so there's kind of a process for all of those. But a lot of these again are the next number 8, about halfway down the page. I should actually change that because we did in 2017 set up a valve testing program and exercising program. So that one could actually be a 4 now. But it's kind of it's a live document and it's always changing and we're always looking at it, trying to improve. But it's a pretty good thing to have.
For sure.
I think it was great.
Yeah.
A question then, so you said that like with that top one there with the first risk of like losing the supply, we've never had a problem up to this point? Like it's.
We did, we had a leak under the highway. That's why I'm very familiar with that one. And it leaked for nearly 2 years. Because we had to get permission from Alberta Transportation, we had to get permission from CP Rail to push in the line under the highway.
Okay.
The problem with that line is it had a Z drop in it. So what they did in 1980 when the line was put in, they pushed a line from both sides and they met in the middle and they didn't line up. So there's one of these in So we
Okay.
couldn't just push a new straight line through it. So we had to actually install a new line, but I don't know if you've ever dealt much with CP rail or transportation, but it's a 2-year progress.
Yeah, I can imagine.
To get approvals. So that line, luckily it wasn't a terrible leak, but it did leak for about a year and a half.
All right.
Yeah.
Good to know.
If it ever is a major catastrophic break,
Yeah.
then we'd be in some trouble.
Mhm. Can I also, sorry,
No, go ahead.
so, but we were also talking about as the town grows,
Mhm.
that second line would also be necessary, right? So it's not just to mitigate this risk, but is it also to aid in our growth?
No, we have, the pipeline from Lethbridge can only put through so much water.
Mhm.
And we have an agreement with the city of Lethbridge and the Water Commission to accept maximum 40 per second.
Mhm.
And the pipe that we have now in the reservoir are built for 5,000 residents.
Okay.
If ever we needed more water and we changed that agreement, we'd have to put a booster pump, probably at the meter vault,
Okay.
just to draw more water because it's pretty much maxed out capacity
Mhm.
for the pressures that we have to draw from Lethbridge.
Okay. The agreement to treat water.
Sorry?
The agreement to treat and send the water.
And send the water,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because it's our water.
Yeah, it's our water under our license. They're looking at.
What's changing that language? It's our
And
water.
just so council is aware, we had a 30-year agreement in 2006 with the city of Lethbridge. And I'll have to double check the date. But I think 2025 is the time where we're gonna have to start to have some conversations with the city about extending it. Because I think, when it's 30 years from 2006, it'll be 2036. So 10 years before they said to start the discussions. I think it was 10. I'll check on that, I'll put it in another report. But I know it's coming up faster than you think. When we signed it, we thought 30 years, that's forever. But now it's sneaking up on us.
Councillor Florence?
So in the event that if it would break, how much water is in the reservoir to like keep everything going?
Without watering, we have about a 2.5 to 3 day supply, probably 3 days. Yeah, we have 3 days water. So any leaks on the supply line, I stock the parts for the majority of it. So we would, of course, it would be a huge priority to fix it within 2 days.
Right. Don't go over 3.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we would put a conserve order on immediately. We do have a process for that, for any boil orders, any conserve water orders. First thing we do is shut down the county truck station. We do, there's a mail system that Ken has that we contact media. And then actually, we have in the fact during conserve orders actually enforced it and got around it. People, it gets to the point if you're watering, we can turn your water off when it's that serious. But it's not very often and it hasn't been for a long time.
Any other questions?
I have a question not related to the water.
Mhm.
At some point, I think we were talking about resurfacing the spray park.
Yes,
Is that planned or upcoming or?
yeah, they're coming tomorrow. I had a call from them yesterday. There's a couple of parts they have to replace. There's a leak up on the slide that's broken. They're bringing those with them. They're coming down and they're gonna fix the problems. I think one of the other items, one of the push buttons isn't working on one of the showers. And then next week, there's a company from Calgary who they should have called in the first place to do the coating on the floor. So it should be done next week.
Excellent. Thanks.
And that's all, is that under warranty?
Oh yeah, we haven't paid them anything for the spray park yet.
Oh.
I think very little, or I think half done. So yeah, we still owe this money.
And we have it, right?
Maybe.
Florence?
I just have another question. I had noticed around town the sidewalks were shaved off, and I hadn't previously noticed, but can you tell me about that? Is it just like accessibility maintenance or
Shade
like
off.
kind of just make them smooth, like the rough edges?
Oh, where there's lips?
Yeah,
Yeah, the guys can go around a couple of times a year, and if there's a trip hazard,
Yep.
they'll just grind the edge off of the one that's higher to make it smooth transition, just for safety.
I was like, did somebody vandalize this? And I was like, no, wait, I think this looks like a good thing. And so, and then I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm gonna ask. So,
Yeah, there's a few more they have to get, I've noticed a few more, but we usually wait till the frost is all up before but we did some already.
Interesting, very cool.
Glad you noticed that.
Good job.
Accessibility.
Yeah, took that. If you notice any too, don't hesitate, or if your neighbors tell you, just tell them to call me.
Okay.
I jot down the addresses, and then when we're doing it next time, we'll catch those.
Sure, what about driveways? Would you do that, like that look, or just the
No.
sidewalks? Okay,
Just on the sidewalks.
okay,
Yeah, we can't control how people built the driveway, if it's gonna go up or down.
makes sense.
I'm wondering, before we say goodbye, can I ask about, so our trail system, we're gonna be looking at putting up some stop signs? Or do not proceed signs?
No parking.
Yeah, just.
So that's so that nobody can stop right in the entrance along 51st, the
Yeah.
trail?
So cars don't block the vision there.
Okay, and we're also looking at putting up more post and chain. And I was wondering if you could give me some thoughts on the post and chain. I mean, I have great respect for our engineers, but they always want to look at the Cadillac version of doing things, so,
These are an afterthought safety concern. The biggest one is at the mobile home park.
okay.
If you drive in the mobile home park and you go to the east, the road along the canal for the mobile home park's here, the path is here, and there's nothing there. If someone comes around and slides, they're gonna go right onto our path system. And they could just drive on.
Okay,
There's easy access there. So that's the biggest portion. There's a couple other portions where people could drive around and drive down paths.
have we seen that yet?
There was originally, when the path was first going in, there was a couple of vehicles caught driving from 45th Avenue to 51st Avenue on it. But so far, it's been okay.
So that would be a significant.
Well, there was one person that, I won't say building, but they were driving around off of 3rd Street and down towards the canal on it for access to their property. So
Okay,
this will stop that as well.
so it's a good investment then.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I appreciate your feedback on that.
Anything else?
Did we want to talk about Miners Park?
Yes,
Okay,
definitely.
all right, so, did you just want to kind of talk about the situation, or who would like to kind of provide the lay of the land?
Well, Kevin had a phone call and then we, on yourself,
Sure.
so, turn it over to Kevin.
Yeah, I guess previously, what we did, I'll tell you what the concerns were first and what we did, and then we can change our mind and we can go back, whatever council would like to do. There was concerns with Miners Park with the trucks and trailers coming in to dump sewage, with kids playing in them coming around. So we are looking, as you're aware, of moving the sewer dump station to stop that. The other concern from previous years was people parking on that road and trucks coming through and kids playing and coming up in between parked vehicles. So it was decided, and no parking signs were put up on the entire roadway all the way around the soccer fields. If we're gonna allow parking on there, what we would have to do is remove those signs, because if the signs are there, our bylaw enforcement would be, or could, and may get pressure from other people to enforce that. So, I guess the concern is there is a lot of, well, some calls for allowing the parking around there. I just wanted to let you know that the reasons we went with the no parking was you're there with your kids playing soccer, and I coached for about 6 years. And it's the siblings running around playing and running out from cars parked along the side of the soccer field. I understand it would be nice to park there, especially if you have little kids and you want to watch the game and you have a baby with you, or it's windy and crappy cold. But I guess it's council's decision, or we all need to be on the same page as what we're allowing and what we're not allowing there. So just looking for some feedback and decisions.
So it sounds as though people have been receiving phone calls on this and expressing concern.
Yeah, about wanting to
Wanting
open
to,
the gates and park, and what I explained is even if the gates are open, you're not supposed to park there. There are no parking signs on the road for safety concerns, but that can be changed.
I know a big part of what our goal was is to just make that a safe place. And I think that was the big thing for parents to be able to go and enjoy the soccer games without having to be concerned about their little ones. The little ones should be able to kind of just run around and play and do their own thing.
Right.
And you're not supposed to have them on tethers and worry about traffic in a park.
Right. So that was the original thought, not to say it can't be changed.
Yeah, so and I think that this is something that it's been coming up obviously more frequently lately, with soccer starting up. And I think that historically, like, I know when my son played soccer, we parked there because everybody else did, and I don't even think I ever noticed those signs.
Mhm.
Now that I'm thinking about it, right? But I think that one of the things when we were talking about this, and you had kind of indicated too that like even if an emergency vehicle needed to get through there, there's not potentially a way.
When
for it
I
to happen.
coached, people would park on both sides, and
Yeah.
then there was arguments with the guy coming through to dump his trailer, and he can't get through, and he's yelling at people to move their vehicles, and it was just creating all kinds of problems now. I don't know if it's different now. Are the kids still siblings of the kids playing soccer, the little ones? Are they still kicking the ball around on the side and playing around the cars? Because that's what it was years ago.
So we're just there.
You were just there.
I would like to think that people watch the kids and keep them off the road. But I hear what you're saying. I think though, and especially when you talk about emergency vehicles, and I think that's a really valid point and something definitely that needs to be considered. But I think what we have now with the congestion at the front of the gate is it's almost made that problem worse. And so like it's a problem and we need to work on it. But the way it is now, it's if somebody has to come through now with everybody blocking it as it is, it's even more blocked, right? And so.
Well, coming in tonight, I know I can't get into my shop.
Exactly, that's exactly what I'm saying though. So if there were an emergency, it's worse now than it would be if it were, so it's, I think it's something we need to talk about.
So would it be a smart thing then to put together a parking plan for that area?
Well, do something like, I guess my thoughts are when we move the sanitary dump, there really isn't a necessary reason for that road. And I know the big soccer fields are a little too narrow. So we could actually grass that and make the soccer field wider and give a place for people to put their picnic tables and chairs out and watch the game.
Right.
There'd be more of a side, what do you call it? Well, beside the soccer field. Because right now it's
It's like a
about
little
this much
social
and
area.
there's posts and chain there. So that's one option. Another option would be is once the sanitary dump is moved, we actually make parking along there. Whether it's, I don't know if there's room for angle parking, but we can look at it and see if there's a way to formalize parking along there so everybody's not just parking on both sides. And so there's some options once the sewer dump is moved.
That will be for a while again, right? Like when.
Well, hopefully this fall.
Oh, it's
If
all
I
okay.
could- Yeah, for next year,
Yeah.
for next soccer season, the sanitary dump won't be there, so. And I don't know, like at other fields when you guys go to them, I know it's been a long time since I've been up to Norwood and to, Iron Springs.
Reviews, yeah.
Usually it's schoolyards, right? So you're parking a ways away from the fields, like you don't park on the
On the
fields.
edge of the.
Well, when I went, I used to go to soccer, you park in the school parking lot or whatever have you, and you walk over.
So I guess it's safety, convenience, parking, it's all an issue, so we need to come up with a plan as a group.
And I know that we did sort of give special consideration to people that had mobility issues.
Yeah, I did talk to them about that, but that puts them in a tight spot too, deciding who gets in, and someone else says, well, I have a little baby, can I come in too? And it worked okay, but I mean, my concern is the park gates do open in a week. Like on 15th, we'll be opening the park gates. So do we want to leave the no parking signs up? Or should we just take them down and allow it for this year, I guess, and then we'll work on
If
it.
you did one side, would that still allow traffic, do you think?
It would. I don't know, I mean, like I say, it's been years, my daughter played 20 years ago, so I don't know what's the safety concerns now up there.
Can I ask, though, when they're parking on the side, is there any kind of repair or cleanup required for those people? Like, I know that I remember when, I mean, we're all thinking back when our kids were playing,
Yeah.
but people would be kind of up on the grass a little bit.
No, I think it's been pretty good that way. I mean, we hope they don't park on the grass on the corners because there are sprinkler heads in there and they're $40 a piece.
Yeah.
Driving over them.
So we haven't had that as
I
a,
don't think so. I'll be honest with you, I have not been up there on a Tuesday or Thursday night. One of my staff needed to get in there last week and he couldn't get through the gate, so yeah, I think he just walked in and grabbed his wrench and left. Used his own vehicle. But yeah, we need a plan.
So I guess for myself, I'm wondering, like, what is your recommendation? So knowing the history, I guess, and like that this hasn't necessarily been patrolled by bylaw in the past.
We didn't really have a peace officer that
Okay.
could take it.
So knowing that, but also knowing that like we're going to be moving this in the fall, what is your recommendation that we do for this year?
I don't know, enforcement's gonna be an issue. There may be some, I guess if they parked on one side and everybody did that, I don't know, there's still some risk. It's, I guess, how much we wanna accept and how much is it our job to control? Or is the onus on the parents or, you know?
well, who's responsible if a child gets struck there?
Yeah.
We're liable, right? It's our park, and we've opened it up for vehicles to be in that area.
Yeah, I don't know.
So then I think it does become a town liability.
Well, I think that like when you look at other fields, as you were indicating, like you don't have that option to drive there,
No.
really, because it's just like you just have to walk to it.
Yeah.
Um,
I came in tonight and everybody seemed to be parked and walked to their game. I understand there are some parents though that are wheelchair accessible and things like that, right? So that's when it, if you don't have accessibility, I guess, you know, they could, and you get out of town people coming in, are they gonna abide by our rules? I mean, we can easily, our soccer association can send out letters to all of our parents and our soccer people, but is everyone else gonna follow that?
well, and I do think though that they can send it out to the entire league.
Okay,
So like they do have access to that. And I don't know, I'd love to hear other thoughts about people and you know.
Well, I mean, I have a young baby, obviously, and like when it was cold out, yeah, we just didn't bring them out. because
No, we make arrangements, right?
There's no way that we could have sat in the car and watched, right, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then like, I mean, we just bought the wagon today and walked, there's no problem.
Yeah.
So I mean, yes, there's a convenience of parking that, I don't think it's that. Like, my 2-year-old was running around, I was trying to watch the game, I was watching it.
but you didn't have to worry about
I
it,
didn't have to worry about it.
right, because it's open, there's no car around.
And I guess that's the value, is that important? Because I mean, saying, you know, we're expecting parents should be keeping an eye on their kids, and most times, yeah, but sometimes it feels really good to not have to, and know that you're in a safe place. And I know that a number of parents have commented on that when they come to do different activities that are like in our closed-in areas, like just how good it feels.
Councilor Ackerman?
Yeah, as a parent of a toddler, I can see the need for safety there. My personal thoughts are, you know, you turn your head for 2 seconds and you don't know what he's getting into, right? So it's kind of like, a kid could easily run through the road there. So I would be kind of for leaving it as is and then possibly looking at what to do next year once that dumping station's gone, just in the sake of safety, right?
Councilor Florence?
So what I'm hearing you say is though, is that the gates are gonna open up and that people are gonna park there if they might, and that there's gonna be no enforcement, potentially, right?
Well, there could be.
Okay,
I guess they take that risk, right, if they do park there.
Right.
And, you know, but I guess we should maybe talk to staff animals, ask them more work, but send out something to parents asking them not to,
Yeah.
just for the safety. You turn around to watch your 8-year-old score a goal and your 2-year-old runs out behind you between parked cars.
yeah, no,
I don't know.
well, yeah, and I hear that, and I think it comes down to individual responsibility. But I think that regardless, it unless we have the bylaw officer sitting out there, or the peace officer, sorry, like, how are we going to control it anyway? And so then it's just going to be like a thing where people are emailing and, you know, confused if there's signs up and there's not necessarily always enforcement. And so is it even something that we can like manage?
I think that, I mean, that would apply to any law that we have.
Yeah, exactly.
A question whether we can manage or not. If we do our due diligence and we request that they send out a letter to all the parents and say that, that no parking was put through there for safety reasons, and that we request that they respect this when they come in, that there's parking to be had for them. And of course, it's getting nicer and nicer. So, I mean, if it's raining and inclement, like, let's bundle up kind of thing. Let's not all angle park and, watch the game from inside our cars. Besides, that's awful. I was a parent running up and down, visiting with everybody, and yelling wildly, waving who wants to sit in a car while the game is going on?
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think it's going, especially at this time of year, I mean, soccer season is honestly, it's coming to a close, right? And so hopefully we're past most of this issue, because like you said, it is getting warm and people are more than likely walking. It is unique in a sense that because the peace officer usually works daytime hours, right? And so we don't always have evening enforcement, we know that. And so that's why it's unique. It's not that it's a law that shouldn't be followed, and I didn't mean to say that we shouldn't be following it, because we should, but I'm just saying, like, if we're saying this and then, not being able to enforce it, what good is it? And so it's.
But you run that risk, I guess, right? So you're putting that on to the parents that if I do park there and she is in this evening, I might get a ticket, and you take that risk. Same with speeding, it's 50 on Main Street, but if she can't be there all the time. If you do speed, you do run the risk of getting caught.
Absolutely, and that's your responsibility.
And also, if you're parked there and goes to the parking area, and the kid gets hurt because they couldn't see him, it's also undone as well.
Right.
So,
They shouldn't be parked there.
because they were contravening the law.
Right.
So either way, it comes back to individual responsibility.
It does.
But I when we look at the peace officer, part of that could be though is that like if we were to go down this route to say like you put out a notice, whether doing it through our channels as well as through CKSA, then maybe there's just a couple of days where she has to kind of be there as, to either do enforcement or to do warnings or to do whatever. And to do that kind of thing, because I do really I know when I went, there was tons of kids that were playing around and doing random things, and I know that even they just don't pay attention, right? They just dart out, they do whatever they do, and I think that, quite honestly, I think that this is more of a liability than it is a convenience for a lot of people, I suppose, is the way that I look at it from the council perspective. Would I love to park close? Absolutely, but is that the best thing for this? I don't believe it is. I think that we need to kind of err on the side of caution with that, and especially when I think about it more from, again, that emergency vehicle component too, because you never know when you're going to have to get an ambulance through there or something, with kids running around doing things with balls and things like that.
Question, when you have been there this year, I guess there hasn't been any parking in there, has there? Because the gates are still closed. I was going to say, are people sticking to one side, or is there room down the middle? I guess we'll see, because that means there's going to be trailers wanting to dump too. Probably not so much on a Tuesday or Thursday night, but that's not to say somebody's going to want to drive their motorhome down there to dump their sewer.
And then cause conflict.
Well, we did have that. There was conflict. But I don't know. That kind of going by the past. This is now, so things change.
And I would suspect that if parents have just always parked on both sides, they probably are doing the same way. Right? I can't. If there's no parking along here, or there's parking over there, I suspect that's the case.
I kind of wonder too if people are just unaware, right? Because I did it because everybody else did it and didn't even look at the signs. Because I'm like, this must be what we do here, right? And then I kind of wonder if it's brought to their attention in the sense of this is security. This is more of a safety situation. But they'd be like, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? I'm hoping that people err on that side. And so I guess in saying all of this, I would, do we need a motion about what we're gonna do, or do we just need a conversation? What do we need to do here?
No,
Just a conversation?
as far as, if you're not changing anything, well,
Yeah.
then it's there, it's just a matter of, not allowing it to happen. I guess when the gates open in 10 days here, whatever it is, you know, we can definitely have a peace officer potentially hit a Tuesday or a Thursday night.
She is in Sunny Wings anyways.
Yeah, just to do that, and I guess, like I say, we can put out the notice, I guess, and send it out to the CKSA organization, just to say, hey, for future, you know, just be aware that this is the scenario, and it'd be a good time to do it before we open up the gates, because right now we can't, but if we do it before we open up the gates, it'd be a good time to put out that message, and just say that, you know, there's no parking signs there, it may be enforced on a given night, and so please don't park there, and we can list, you know, the safety and the emergency and the RV scenarios, as the reasons why.
I think it would be important though, if we were to send our peace officer down there, that it would be more for education and awareness.
Yeah, I don't think you have tickets, you know,
Just,
a whole bunch, but.
because I actually think that, I mean, Martina is correct in that. I think a lot of people just do it because others are doing it. Because others are doing it because someone else always did it, and so it just becomes a better practice, right?
Yeah, and then we can revisit the whole road idea once the sanitary dump is gone.
Yeah.
Don't even need it.
Yeah, and it'd be nice to be able to put together a good parking plan.
We need a little better parking plan.
And maybe, you know, maybe that is sort of an area where we can have sort of wheelchair access parking or something by each field with a clearly, you know, a clear sign. Until we can get those roads repaired where a wheelchair can get in there during inclement weather, because they are a little soft, those roads still, eh?
No, they're just, they're nothing soft this year, it's dry. But it's hard to push accessibility or a walker over gravel.
Yeah.
When there is drainage up there someday, it's been my dream to pave those roads and have proper drainage in there.
Is that your bucket list?
Yeah, I've got a big one.
It's gonna put you off from retiring for a number of years. Yay. Just keep that bucket list growing. But that would be wonderful.
So I guess, just in hearing this conversation, so my suggestion would be that, and feel free to add in or disagree with any piece of this, is that it's left the same as it has been, but a notice is put out via, like, I think we need to have something written that can go to CKSA for them to go to their parents. But we also need to be putting something out on all of our channels too, so the website and any other piece like that, that could just kind of let people know, I guess, the stance on this, because I think, you know, with Miners Park, it's been with getting soccer in there this year and everything, I think that it's good for us all to kind of be on the same page with this too, if we get any questions within the community.
Because there hasn't been soccer for 2 years, has there?
No, I guess not. No. Councilor Florence?
So I guess my one concern would be putting out a notice like that. I mean, we're kind of in a position where we're not always seen favorably, and I would be worried about like what that would do for how people think that we operate. And it's that we like to send out notices and shut things down. And so I don't think that's good for the town of Culver's and what we're trying to do moving forward right now. And so that's my thought.
What about it do you think would make people feel like we're shutting it down?
I think there's this attitude coming out from this of like, we're shutting this down, you know, instead of, you know, gently asking people, we're gonna be sending this notice. And I just don't think it's conducive to being like, you know, we support our residents that help pay for this field, that kind of thing. So I don't love that idea, and I'm just sharing that thought.
What would your suggestion be to do different? What would you suggest we do?
I honestly think that, I mean, if we as a group decide to leave the signs up, that's one thing, but I would follow with my earlier comments of, I don't think it's something that we're going to have a lot of success in trying to control, and so it might be a big headache. Yeah.
See, and I guess from my perspective, I actually see it as by not doing anything, I think we're ignoring a potential situation where we have the responsibility. And I can understand it potentially looking like we're shutting it down, but I'm looking at this very much from that safety aspect. Not because I don't want people to have that convenience, but I'm looking at it very much from that child or that piece.
Totally, and I so appreciate that. And again, from being down there tonight and from being down there last week, and even conversations that I brought up to the CAO and at this table and my concerns, and even with people being backed up to that gate, if there's an emergency situation right now, it's still not gonna be good. I love what you're saying about moving the dump station and getting the RVs out of there and completely changing it, because I'm not sure that there is a good solution right now, because there's still problems, right? And so,
You know, I agree with you that there really isn't a good solution at this point, and coming up with a good solid parking plan for the future is gonna be a good solution. But right now, what is the best solution that we have? And I understand your concern that people are feeling frustrated and they want to be able to park there. And they feel as though we're taking something away from them every time we try to enforce things. But again, it is just weighing about people's perception of what's happening versus safety. And I'm landing on the side of safety right now. And knowing that we have signs in place and knowing there's a reason why those were put there, to not reach out and provide education to people to say, you know, in fact, we do have signs up and we request that there is no parking along the sides of our fields. You know, please respect that.
Well, I think it's the way it's worded too, right? Like, it's not like thou shalt not. I think it's very much to say like, these are some things that have come up. And in looking at all the different factors, this is kind of where we landed based on these things. So to me, it's more about that education component of it and to say like, this is why we got to this point, rather than just being like, no, you're gonna get ticketed. That's how I guess I like to be communicated with, like knowing the reason, I suppose. And so, thoughts from Councillor Cochery or Councillor Ackmans?
I do think we need a better plan for parking out there. I think the walking aspect, sure, it's convenient. I mean, I'm new to soccer. It's my first year of it. Not being able or having to walk that distance is not an expectation I have. So I don't mind keeping the no parking if it helps keep my kids safe. So, as for the emergency access, like, yeah, exactly. I feel like there needs to be a better parking plan in place because of the gravel parking lot. It's hard to know where to park. I mean, surely we could put up some jersey barriers or some wheel stops or something to try and at least define it, even if it's still a gravel parking lot, right? And some signage, far lane no parking or something like that. Just a better plan to at least formalize those stalls so that we can ensure we have better emergency access. So I don't think it will cost a lot of money to do that. We won't have to pave, but I wonder if we could do something to help try and bridge that gap. So I'm in favor of leaving the no parking signs up currently until we have a better parking plan in place.
Thank you. Councillor Ackmans?
Just a question, how many more weeks of soccer are left this year? Does anyone know?
Oh, approximately.
Well, the tournament is.
June or end of May?
Or June.
I think
And then the campground opens in a week and a half,
May 15th.
so we're only looking at approximately 3 weeks, give or take. Yeah, I think that leaving the signs up and just kind of, being proactive and just saying like, hey, we're just requesting that if you can not park along the field, that would be beneficial for safety concerns and as long as
There
it's
is
done.
no parking zone, we're just asking if you don't.
Yeah, it's just kind of like a reminder with the park opening and everything. Because I think that, I just think, even with my kids, I understand there's a responsibility as an adult, but when you get kids together, they can turn just like that and just run away on your rate. So I just kind of think of with all the other kids there, I think safety is the biggest thing for me.
And what I'll do then with, for next year is I will talk, we'll have another discussion this fall on it to come up with a plan for next year.
Great.
So are you okay with that? I know that.
Well, we're a group, so if everybody else is good with that, then I will go with that as well.
So would it just for my clarification, do you think that if we were to leave up the no parking signs, do you think that we should put out the notice to the CKSA and put that on the website? Should we draw attention to it that way? Or are you thinking that it's better that we just?
I don't know if I have an opinion either way on that one. I know that previously CKSA did put out a notice and it did go to the entire league about parking. And so, yeah.
Okay. So if we're all in agreement that safety is kind of paramount, what if we explore that route then of just leaving it as it is? But then I think we do need to put some communication out there, and we can word it very much in the way that Deputy Mayor Caldwell was saying, of like, just wanting to let you know that like, we do have these signs. You may have missed them, and however, we're asking that you consider the safety aspect of this, and kind of if we focus it more that way. And I think that that's what we can do at this point in time.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
And telling us about your report and this really great risk register looking thing. Great.
Okay, it's about our drinking water.
Great.
And like I say, if you want to see the full report, it's basically about 35 pages of this. But if you're interested, let me know and I can print you off a copy.
Good.
If anyone wants one.
I think we can trust your judgment.
You gave us a nice sample.
35 pages of risk management on our water. Thank you.
They can get pretty onerous and boring too. Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, have a good night. All right, so we'll go back to our agenda here. We have no citizens without formal notice, so we're just gonna go right into our business arising from previous minutes. Strategic planning update. Yeah, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I guess just to let you know where things are at. So I have, we talked about the June 3rd, 4th weekend as the possibility to go. We talked about Waterton. So I have arrangements made with Waterton at the Waterton Lakes Lodge for rooms, and they also have you can order the catered, breakfast, lunches, whatever you want to, or they said we're small enough that we could order individually off the as well ahead of time, perhaps, and that's easy for them to bring in. You can have a room, banquet room, or whatever, partial banquet room that is set up for the Friday, Saturday sort of thing for us to access that. In terms of that, I mean, they also have a coffee, tea, cold drink sort of that they would supply for the room as well. I mean, there's cost obviously, but that's there as well. There was the possibility, if you wanted, there also is a suite for, after, if you wanted to go that route. Otherwise, basically they said you could be in the banquet room for till whatever, I guess the bar closed or what you call it. You would have to order off the bar. You couldn't bring in outside food or drinks or anything like that by doing that. But she said that was no problem. I have talked to Strategic Steps as well. They'll be flying into Lethbridge, looks like on the Friday, roughly 11 a.m.-ish is when their plane is due to arrive. So they're talking possibly, if it's a Waterton location, a 3 p.m. start probably is what they'd be talking about. But they'll finalize details a little bit closer to. There will be 2 of them coming at this point. Looks like Ian and Lauren are the 2 that would be coming unless schedules change. There is the pre-session survey. I have that, and we'll be sending that out probably tomorrow. There's one that's for council. There's one for administration or management, and actually management gets both. Council gets just one to be submitted prior to. I think they were looking for basically the end of next week for responses on that survey, and that they can have to prepare for that at the time. I think that was it, other than I guess if there was different arrangements for supper Friday night, I guess, depending on what you want to do there, whether you want it to be someplace else or different or whatever, other reservations or something to that effect. If there's any other questions, that's kind of what I've got figured out at this point.
What staff, who's going to be coming or?
It sounds like both the Director of Operations and Director of Corporate Services would be available, so.
That's great.
At this point, so.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think it would be nice for us to have a dinner together somewhere that evening, as a group, wherever, I don't know, I haven't been to Waterton in a while, so I know the hot dog place.
No. There's a really good Italian place.
Okay,
Yeah,
and that place.
Yeah, that's nice in the festival.
Which one?
Yeah, I think the Italian, I don't know what
It's
it's called.
called something Red Rock Territorial or something.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be nice just to do that kind of, I think, as as the end of that Friday. But I think otherwise, like I don't think, in my opinion, we don't need to speak, we can just kind of hang out in the breakout room or whatever it's called if we want to.
Yes, partial banquet room, they sort of sound like, that's what they say, conference room, so.
Well, plus I mean, we'll be going out for dinner and stuff like
Yeah.
that, so. And there's picnic tables around the, outside of the hotel area.
There we go. I think that's great. That sounds like I think it'll be a really great weekend. I'm looking forward to it. So thank you for getting all that together. I'm excited for it, and I want to see, what's going to come of this, because as you indicate, or I guess attach some of the strategic plans for the other municipalities, it'll be nice to see what ours look like then.
So just my question, I guess, in terms of the Saturday morning breakfast, lunch, would it be easier just to send out the menu, everybody sort of do what they want to do? I think that's
I think so.
probably better.
Yeah,
So,
that works for me.
okay.
Yeah, so work for everybody?
Coordinate that prior to or whatever, so you can put that in.
Perfect.
Finalize from there, and as more details come, I guess we'll let you know, but look forward to the survey this week.
Question on that then too. Does that mean that shortly thereafter, the community consultation stuff will start?
Sounded like when I talked to Ian previously, he said that some would be not virtual, but, sort of online sort of thing, and some possibly would be dealt with differently, so.
Okay.
I assume that they would be done prior to, so they'd have those results.
Yeah.
Prior to the situation.
Because I would assume that they need access to the people, so they need to come through administration to do that.
Whatever groups or whatever, from 55 plus to whoever we can choose to vote on this, so.
Perfect. Great. Any other questions about strategic planning?
The Saturday session would go all day until about 5 p.m. or something, or 4, something like that.
I would think it probably until at least 3:34 at the earliest is my assumption, but.
Yeah, that's what he was kind of talking, I think, I forget how many hours sort of work he was saying, but yeah, probably later afternoon to be done, so.
That's great. That would be awesome. Okay, so let's move on to the National Police Federation about keeping Alberta RCMP, community engagement final report. Sia, is there anything that you want to highlight from that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not a whole bunch, I guess. Obviously, we've had various correspondence, so we've attended various sessions as well, I think, in terms of this. And I think even from this group, we did send a letter not too long ago in support of this group as well when they asked for that to move ahead with their keep the Alberta RCMP plan. So this is as a result of their engagement, as indicated, their final report outlining, I guess, the reasons why perhaps you should keep the Alberta RCMP, where it's at in terms of the province. I guess, I haven't had any updates as to what their latest word is on that, but this is kind of their final report from the engagement with public. So that's about all. That's some information, I think, just keep you up to date.
Any questions on that? No? Okay. So let's move into our your bylaws and reports, starting with the committee meeting minutes. So we'll start out with the policy bylaw review committee. And what's our acronyms? I can't remember that, but great. So I'll just turn this over to you.
Yeah, so I think the minutes kind of go over everything. We just kind of looked mainly at like volunteering, an umbrella with everything that's kind of associated with the donation of community goods and the volunteering within the community. So there was a few recommendations that came out of that. One of the things that we did was the policy for the staff volunteer appreciation event. We kind of referred that to the staff volunteer appreciation event committee. The use of grills, we were looking at possibly having an administrative procedure so that if they needed to change something on that side, it wouldn't have to come through council and they could kind of stay up to date on that. Electronic message center was another one we went through with no changes at that time. Community grant program, we were looking at an online fillable form for that just to make the process a little bit easier. Public participation, just kind of some housekeeping notes on there. Yeah, just kind of cleaning up a few things, or just skipping over the recommendations for the moment. And then the use of town property, no changes were recommended at that time. And we had a couple recommendations come out of that one. So I'll let you read your recommendations there, Deb, or Councillor Florence.
Okay, so I move that administration would redraft policy number 00-01-12, volunteer appreciation awards, to provide for notice of a call for nominations of individuals in January or February, selection of recipients in conjunction with National Volunteer Week, and a presentation of the award by council at a selected meeting.
Any questions? Or discussion? All in favor?
Good recommendations.
That's carried, thank you. Move on to the next one.
Okay, let's go again. So I move that the council of the town of Cohurst hereby authorize an amendment to policy number 12-01-02, scholarships, to include a rubric point criteria for judging purposes for point 3 and 4, and the rubric is included.
Any questions on this item? Discussion, all in favor? That's carried, thank you.
Then I made the recommendation that we move that the council of the town of Cohurst hereby rescind policy number 12-02-06, which is the use of photocopy machine by local groups.
Any questions on this item?
I have a question. So what is the policy going forward then? There's no policy, I guess, is what we're
No.
sitting at.
Because from my understanding, I believe the minors' days policy kind of referenced use of that, but then none of the other groups really reference use of that, so. We were thinking that, why am I drawing a blank here? Sorry.
Oh, right, if you look at the minutes, it says that, like, we'll look into the encompassing policy for town services and equipment as a whole, rather than just piece by piece.
Because I know when I was part of the Parks and Rec Society, we didn't use it often, but we did use it occasionally.
I would think that if a community group wanted to use it, they would just talk to the town and kind of work it out between the town.
Okay. So I guess part of this is redrafting then some kind of use of town property, or not use of town services equipment, but use of town property is different than.
Yes.
Any further questions? All in favor? That's carried. Great, thank you. All right, so let's move on to MSDA, Council Poetry. I think that's your committee.
Yeah, I'm sure of that one.
Anything you want to highlight on there for us?
It was a fairly in-depth conversation we had regarding the proposed shed. I did make a note in my report about this because we feel like I think there's a lot of sheds that are within setbacks of your property. Like I think a lot of people have sheds that are right against their fences. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows somebody who has at least one shed against the fence. And in this case, they were doing their due diligence to apply for a development permit because they had some permanent foundations, and that's why they required the permit. So we were discussing if since it's common practice, would there be consequences? And in the end, there was no good reason to grant the waiver. But I believe I heard that our officer, Mitchell, in discussion with the applicant, they decided to use a temporary foundation anyway, so they can relocate it as needed. So is that correct to say? So I was just curious, I guess, since they didn't need a development permit on this anymore, they've already paid their fee. Was there any request from the applicant for a refund on that at all?
No, because I mean, again, the request for the waiver was still put forward, the meeting was still held, so there's.
And we did approve it.
Yes.
So, okay. All right. Thank you.
Great, any questions about MSDA?
I might just add though as well, our new development officer, is it Marshall? Mitchell, I apologize, Sarah Mitchell, is updating a lot of our forms, and so far it's looking just fantastic. So just sort of increasing clarity there is some talk about going online with them as well, right? So that people can apply for just different development permits, and a lot more information, a lot more detail to them.
That's great.
So yeah, make the process much easier.
That's correct, and we don't have technically a process for approving those forms because they're not part of the bylaw. So I think she's brought them to us, and then we provided our comments back to her. And then I believe we want everyone in council to have a look before we move forward, I believe.
Question about that, so should there be a bylaw created, or is it?
I don't know. A policy maybe
Okay.
would be appropriate perhaps, I don't.
Yeah, I don't know, because it is administrative, but it is a communication with the public. So, I mean, there's a,
Yeah, and as Diane mentioned, I can keep them separated from the bylaws so we can update them as required without having to do 3 readings.
Okay, oh, we're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So possibly a policy maybe,
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
And we have implemented one other change, which I thought was really nice to see, is that even though we don't approve the sort of the waiver or the request as it stands, we approve it without the waiver. And so that takes away that additional step and that additional development fee. So if a person puts in a fee for a development request for waiver, if their waiver was refused, they would then have to reapply for a new development. And so we now have a sort of a one-stop process, is it will approve their development just without the waiver. And so they can move forward. And that also makes it a little smoother, right? Am I right in that, scale about it? That they don't have to come back again with a new fee or, and more time.
I will say kind of in part of this conversation, even with our policy bylaw committee meeting, one of the things we talked a lot about, or maybe not a lot, we talked about was this idea of policy versus administrative procedures.
Mm-hmm.
Because we found that some policies have a lot more administrative component to them versus others. And then looking at like, how do we separate that out so that if, the stuff that should be more administrative, it doesn't have to come back through the policy bylaw committee and then be approved through council again, because some of the stuff in there, I'm just trying to think of what.
Use of grills was probably one.
Yeah, like use of grills, it was like, there's something in there that was worded very much in the sense that like,
With
If
direction from
administration-
council.
or if administration were to try it and say it didn't work for whatever reason, but it's very administrative, you'd still have to at that point still come through and change that. And so kind of looking at how we could split those out a little bit more so that there is more clarity. And from my perspective, I think that in doing that, and I know that this would be a significant amount of work, but I think it would provide more clear lines as to where council and administration meet a little bit more so, I guess. So that was just a conversation that we had, and I think it's worth kind of exploring that and just like looking at them with that eye to see what's administrative versus policy within it.
Mhm.
Okay, a little tangent there, but thank you. So we'll move on to Rec and Culture Committee, unless there's anything else for MSDA. Deputy Mayor Caldwell, is there anything from Rec and Culture that you would like to highlight? I know we're both there.
I would.
Sure.
I would, thank you. And I'm going to assume that everybody had a chance to read through it. There's a lot of information in that meeting, a lot of conversation. There was some concern that there was some confusion around the role of that committee. There's some concern that it was considered to take the place of a recreation coordinator because have been approached by different community members. And really, is it considered to be a working committee, or is it a committee of council and the community? And so we have had some people stepping back a little bit. So we recognize that we may have taken on a little bit of a big role. And so again, it came up, we were looking for an update. Members of the committee were looking for an update regarding if there was any conversation about looking at sort of a recreation coordinator position or some kind of administrative or staff support for this committee to move forward with recreation. As well, There were a couple of recommendations that came out of this, and while we appreciated receiving the policy around having availability of community facilities for minors' days, we found that that particular policy was specific to a minors' days committee, and this didn't really fit with this specific committee because the minors' day committee was something very different. And I wonder if did that resonate, C.A. O'Hara, when you received that information back from Ashley? Did that make sense, or did you need any clarity on that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd say yes or no.
Okay.
On the simple fact of, I guess, I realize that what you're stating, Deputy Mayor Caldwell, in terms of saying, minors' day committee policy, and this committee is not minors' day committee. However, I guess the intent of policy bylaw, I think, in referring this to rec and culture was such that at this point, we don't have a minors' day committee, period. The
Yeah.
policy that we had in place stated, the insurance, it stated the dates, it stated all that type of stuff. So if there was changes being made to the overall minors' day concept, I guess that's where it was hoped that rec and culture would come forward with a policy to address the new minors' day concept, I guess, maybe is the word I put to it. And, maybe then the old policy for minors' day committee would be rescinded, I guess, at this point in time.
I see. So you were sending it so that we could look at it and sort of explore a replacement policy because I think it would be recreation and culture that is the arm of the town of Coalhurst that sort of took on the role of minors' days and looking at partnering with our different community organizations and groups to put on minors' days. And so that's sort of like the new format. And so you were hoping that we might be able to come up with sort of a policy, I suppose you're saying, that's similar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I guess I'd defer to the members of the policy bylaw review committee if that's the take they had on it, but that certainly was my take, I guess.
Can I speak to this? Okay, so I do want to clarify that, because reading the minutes, I was a little confused. So, I guess, so the purpose of sending it that way is as we move through old bylaws and policies, we're examining them and deciding how to make them better. So we're looking at them not just as a piece of paper, but a policy or a bylaw that reflects a practice. And so if it's still relevant, it's working, how to make it better if need be. So we know minors' days isn't sustainable to keep running as it is. History has shown us this over the years. Many groups have fluctuated in being able to pull it off in the last 30 years. So it requires a ton of more time than volunteers have to give. Event volunteers are not a problem, but board volunteers we know are a problem. This isn't just an issue for minors' days, it's an issue for other committees too. We've seen it even with our lovely youth committee. So as the Rec and Culture Committee and the committee that oversees the high level development of new and ongoing programs in Coalhurst, we thought it appropriate to send it to that committee for further input. So moving forwards, how are we going to make minors' days sustainable long term? It is. I'm reading off my notes, bear with me. So the committee is not unique in the fact that there doesn't seem to be great board retention, but it is unique in the fact that it's like the one big event for the town, right? And so that is the uniqueness. And so when we talk about all of these things, I think that we need to look at how we can support all the community groups, but I also think that there is uniqueness in this specific situation. Tongue twister. So instead of making or in addition to making recommendations for a new policy specifically regarding the 2022 event, would it be better to instead focus on a higher level approach on how to create practices and strategies to support all the community groups and then make them more sustainable long term? Further down, Heather, Deputy Mayor Caldwell, when you talked about insurance coverage, I think that's a great example of a strategy or an approach to be able to develop policies that lead to sustainability for these volunteer boards, right? Mm-hmm. And other examples are remuneration, volunteer appreciation. So there was no indication of passing it off as it was. It's totally a different thing. But the idea was to get further input on how to develop those best practices moving forward, and then moving forward, hopefully, as you were stating, and that really resonated with me when you were talking about even never stepping back a little bit. Because I very much, as we get more into this, even with some of the emergency stuff, I very much see it as an advisory committee. And so it's interesting that you say that, because I would 100% agree with you on that, that some of that stuff is more in a role that could be an admin role, right? Or community engagement person.
Some staff,
yeah.
some kind of staff.
Yeah,
support.
and the expectation, if this current committee is gonna be doing that, I mean, it's gonna be in the same position as all the other committees, right? And this is the meat council committee, this is the umbrella, right? This is the one that, and so that, I just wanted to clarify that, and Councillor Ackermans, I hope that kind of summarized it. But it was very much about, it wasn't about passing it off, it was about like, how do we make this sustainable, but how do we make everything more sustainable? Because we don't want people burning out. We don't want groups dropping it. We want all these things to be successful.
And you know what, I appreciate hearing that from you, and I apologize. I think had there been just some small brief sent along with that, we would have been understanding. Our understanding at the table was it was brought forward to us to see if we could change that policy to accommodate the new dates that were being asked. And so I think that there was some misunderstanding in the transfer of that document to us. And that's why we said, well, we can't go into a policy for a different committee to change those dates, right? And so that wouldn't have relevance for us, right? And so that's why we got that response, because I agree, I think we need to have big overarching policies. And as you'll see further down, looking at developing strong memorandums of understanding to support our different community groups. And right now, I mean, we have Parks and Rec in place, so of course we'd start with who we've got in place. We look at how we can support with insurance and what other supports we can put in place, and really grow those leaders back again. We have to do it with intention to really get those leaders in our community stepping up and doing that volunteer work in different groups. And I think if we put together a really great package, because we do have sort of that funding available to support different events, and I think at the end of the day, our goal is all the same here, is looking at how do we make it easy for these folks to want to step up, how can we support them, and just get this done, get it growing and going, right? So yeah, so thank you for that information. So I suppose if you wanted to send it back so that we could disseminate it a little bit more at our next committee meeting and look at, what can we provide in terms of, our thoughts and ideas into it.
Thank you. Yeah, kind of like CAO, how Matt mentioned previously, it's just kind of, it's probably going to be a rewrite for the policy from what we were seeing, but it was just because you guys were working with putting on the event, it might be easier to kind of work with that and just lay down kind of the framework for what we want to see for that going forward. I think one of our concerns is just, it's kind of a premier event for the town. We just don't want to lose that. So that's why we wanted to find a way to make it a little bit more sustainable. And then instead of us trying to guess or dictate how it's going to go, we figured if you guys are involved with the planning of it and the operation of it, you'd have a little bit more input, and then it's not kind of throwing the ball back and forth so much, right?
Yeah, thank you for that, yeah.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying totally makes sense, and I don't think that there was ever, and I hope that you didn't take it that we thought you were just throwing it to that committee to just do. I think that when we got it though, I think it was how it was presented, right, about just like updating the date, and then we're looking at it and we're going, well, this doesn't really make sense because we're not actually this autonomous committee. And so then it was something when I think when we looked at it, we're like, this is a much larger discussion than just changing the dates right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But what you're saying absolutely makes sense with that now that we've had that discussion.
Yeah, and it's funny because there's been a few instances lately, or maybe it's just my notes around cutting it, but where these things are going back and forth to committees, right? But it seems funny, but or maybe it's just funny to me, but it's a good way to get the work done, right? Or hopefully that it goes to these working committees, but we're just batting it back and forth.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it's a great idea, and I think that we should sit down with it and look at it and say, okay, well, what, how can we really beef up a really good policy? And, I mean, we're not getting creative, but we can give some great input and sort of grow that policy, right, as different council committees, for sure.
Great.
I think that's great. Yeah, thank you.
Anything else for me to Mayor Caldwell, or is that good for that committee?
That was everything, thank you.
Perfect.
I have a question.
Oh, your question, sure?
Couple things. So I mentioned the Sunday breakfast with council, and I think that from a religious perspective, I think anybody who's practicing a religion, a Sunday religion, would probably not choose to attend. I don't think they would be offended that we held it, but I just think they would choose not to attend. So I think we would lose some people who are attending there. I mean, that said, there are religious groups who meet on Saturday too, but I think the majority of the Christian religions meet on Sunday. So
May I ask then, we kind of tossed around that, what about like a brunch, a later brunch with a bit of a market, sort of in the afternoon,
On Saturday or something.
on the Sunday? We want to make it a whole weekend thing,
Oh.
so we're
But
trying to
I
find
think
what Friday night is all day Saturday,
Most,
and we're hoping to just have something that was just this gentle close out for the weekend.
I think that most of the Christian congregations meet on Sunday morning, so I think, I don't know that any time Sunday morning would work.
Yeah.
For that group of citizens.
Okay.
I would have to second what Councillor Butcher is saying, just in terms of even like, I would say the whole day. So, but it's interesting because Deputy Mayor, you probably remember when the Good News Center put on an outside church service and a pie judging contest. I think that was in like 2013 or 2014. That's really cool. So pie judging.
Pie judging, I can't remember, where was I?
I don't know, but I won second place with my key lad.
I've had pies in the face for this town, why don't I pie?
I don't make that one day.
And then I have one other comment for, with the resignations that we received, has there been effort to recruit any new members at this point?
I think we wanted to really get a solid idea of what we were as a committee first, and make sure to remove the confusion. Because anybody that we move into that role is going to be subject to the same kind of asks and not understanding what the expectations are of them, right?
And I think that also because like we are sitting in May now, right, and we have our organizational meeting in September. At this point, I think that what the committee's kind of talked about is really focusing more on the minors days aspect of it for this year to really pull that together. And then I think that part of this has to do with kind of what does recreation look like for us moving forward, like knowing what pieces work with this and maybe figuring out what pieces don't. And so I don't know, like Deputy Mayor Tom was saying, bringing someone on in the midst of this would be the best. So I was just, I mean, my thought we were waiting until September to do anything different.
Yeah, I guess I was just curious if you had enough input from the community or enough resources even of people to support that effort. So, but it sounds like what you're saying is that it would bring further effort to.
Yeah, because I think the way that it's working right now is that like Parks and Recreation is kind of taking on more of that lead with the coordination of all the different minor days activities. And so those people are being looped in on that level, but not necessarily at this committee, more strategy level, I guess, of what that's looking like at this point. So.
That's not worse.
Not to say that nobody's invited, anyone can come if they would like to, but we just haven't reached out, I think, into the community at this point too.
You know, and actually, while we're speaking about this, we really have to give a hats off to our Parks and Recreation Committee. They were recently in the Lefpertero with the Ukrainian Easter egg color or painting, and then they just received volunteer awards, did they not?
Mm-hmm.
For the work that they do for our town, so, yeah. So that's kind of cool.
That's great. Okay, so let's move on to the Emergency Advisory Committee, and Councillor Florence, I believe are you the chair of this one?
I am actually not the chair. Chris Evans is the chair.
Oh, yes, okay.
But I will give a quick update.
Okay, perfect.
That's okay. So this was the first ever, the inaugural Emergency Advisory Committee. Not just the first one for this council, but the first one like ever. So it's very cool. Bit of a different way of doing things, but it seems like it's going to be good to just support the solid emergency plans and operations. I'm very excited to work with such a driven group of folks. Everybody that is a part of that committee, the volunteers, have emergency background and experience, and best of all are extremely passionate about that emergency management. So yeah, we went over the MEP. We had previously gone over, so you're aware of the inefficiencies, and then moving forward with the regional approach, it might look a little different than originally anticipated. But regardless of how it gets ironed out, as indicated in the minutes, we need an interim DEM and an emergency team. So have asked for more information to be brought to our next meeting, which will be coming up this month to further discuss.
Great. Any questions? Well, I'm glad that you had your first meeting ever. That's awesome. That's exciting. And it's good to see work being done in this area. So thanks for being part of that committee, and thank those lovely volunteers for us too. I think that's fantastic. All right, if there's no questions, we'll move to staff and volunteer appreciation event committee. Councillor Poetry, this is you're the chair of that one?
Yes.
Anything you want to highlight from that one?
We talked about a few things regarding the policy. The guest list was a bit of a challenge for us because it's hard to figure out where to define, I guess, who should be attending this event. Because as it's labeled as a volunteer appreciation event, we thought, well, anyone who's volunteered, 5 minutes, should they be invited? Or are we actually looking to target more of the people who are making big contributions to this town? Or volunteers who, to the volunteer fire department, I think is the main target of that word. But then, it's going to be opened up to some other, but then, so it's like, how do we open it up to the right groups, I guess, to show our appreciation to the people who deserve it the most. So that's kind of the challenge that Councillor Lawrence and I are dealing with. So I guess if you guys have any thoughts on that, we would appreciate if you have any ideas. We would appreciate you guys reaching out to us. I don't know, or you can tell us now, I guess, but think about it. I think we have time to decide on, until, say, invitations go out in October, so we have time to think about this, I think, and do it the correct way. So, what CAO had mentioned was that in the past, this has been another topic of great discussion that has come forward to determine who is most appropriate to attend this event. So, I don't think we're breaking any new ground here. It's just there's pros and cons to doing a lot of different approaches, I think, and so we just want to make the correct decision. So,
from my perspective, if you'd like it right now, I can
sure.
tell you.
Yeah.
From my perspective, I think that this is one part of a volunteer program that needs to be developed for the community or for the town. And in my perspective, I think that when you've got episodic event-based volunteers, I think that they need to be recognized in a different way, and maybe that's something during National Volunteer Week, that's something that's a little bit more broad, I suppose. In my opinion, I think that this needs to be kind of limited to more of those leadership volunteers. So whether that's the fire department, whether it's people that's on our committees, or groups like that we feel are appropriate. So I don't think it should just be anybody, because if you do that, you're always going to probably miss somebody. Unless you've got a really, really great tracking system. And so that's why I think that it should kind of be centered more around those like community leadership volunteers.
And I agree with you, and I know that we sort of, at some point, we kind of reached this this consensus that any group that is sort of an arm of the community, right? That's when we started to identify as those leadership volunteers in our community, right? But we also, we've done all kinds of different things. We have had celebrations during Volunteer Week. There was one spring or early summer, we did a big barbecue just to say thank you to everybody who volunteers in our community, right? So like a burger and a balloon flower, and because this is a very specific event with lots of prizes and hours of recognition. Well, I guess it's not necessarily hours, is it, CAO? It can feel that way, right? But it's like sort of those long-term service awards, and and they're very meaningful to all of those of us that are really involved in the community, but maybe not so much, the folks that you don't know who these people are and stuff.
Maybe part of it's reframing the name of it too, where it's more like community leaders celebration or something like that, because I think that it's very specific to that. So someone couldn't say, well, I volunteered once to do whatever. So if you frame it more in that regard, and then I think that as this program is kind of developed, when we look at this as holistically, because hopefully what would happen is that you bring someone through that funnel, right? Or maybe they started as a event volunteer, then become more and more involved, and they would eventually end up in that community leaders pool where they would be part of this.
I really like that.
I do. Yeah.
That helps, I think, defining it a lot better.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a good, and that might be something. Does it require a big change to do a name change? Do we have to give it 3 readings or anything like that?
It's just a policy.
Add it to the-
You know, it'd be nice to have it before our next event, because I think that you just hit the nail on the head, right? If we do a name change, we really can clearly identify who it is that we're focusing and targeting this for. And then, and then find different ways to recognize the community volunteers.
Any other comments or discussion on this item?
It's gonna be fun.
It sounds like it's gonna be awesome, I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, and so the casino night, you're looking at going through the Rotary Club? Is it the Rotary that,
Kinsman.
or the Kinsman, sorry, the Kinsman group, that's right.
Cool.
Lovely.
All right, and then we have committee of the whole. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything from there that they would like to bring up? If not, can I get a motion to accept the committee minutes?
I'll make that motion. I move that the committee minutes presented in this meeting are accepted.
Thank you. Any questions, discussion?
Yeah, just a quick, did we land on something for Public Works Week?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mentioned it to our Director of Operations. Looked like the Monday was probably the best day, which would be the 16th, but he was gonna check and he hasn't got back to me yet, so I'll have to inquire again as to what date. So Monday, I think Monday or Wednesdays were the better days, he said, other than Fridays, but Fridays before the long weekend, so not so much. So it looks like probably Monday or Wednesday, but probably Monday.
Monday being the 16th,
I think so, but I'll confirm that with him again.
and we're taking him out for lunch to say thank you.
Yeah, we talked about, well, nothing too extravagant, I think. I think pizza or something like that. We sort of said maybe the shop again, so it's kind of dirty. I mean, the park will be open on the 15th, so maybe in the social area. If it's a, reasonably decent day, probably be a place to do it. So.
Wonderful. Thank you. I just had been reading earlier with the Staff Volunteer Appreciation Committee, they were, it sort of stated that they would check with the rest of council to plan something for National Public Works Week, and I didn't know if you had some thoughts about.
No, thanks for bringing that forward. Yeah, that was our lunch thing. Yeah.
It was going to be the lunch. Okay, no big giant thank you banners and.
Not this year, that's next.
That's next.
All right.
You know, gold-plated plungers and things like that.
If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. All right, so now moving on to the CAO report. CAO, is there anything that you would like to highlight in the report for us?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple, I guess, in regards to the electric vehicle charging program. I just put there that we had submitted the expression of interest and did have a discussion with the individual involved with the MCCAC. As indicated there, a lot of applications for the funding that's available. So it was felt to pursue further at this point to get an electrician and pay that to kind of get things and submit the application. It didn't seem like it was probably the prudent thing to do in the sense we're on the long waiting list and probably the chances are not that great. There is the possibility of going under the Southborough one, which is 46% funding, but this one is basically 100% other than some little hookups or whatever to it. And it sounded like they, there's a possibility that the funding could be topped up or definitely there'll be programs in the future. On the sounds of where it's going. So that one we just felt we would leave for now. A couple others, I guess, just the main constructed wetland storm facility. We met yesterday and today actually on that to look at kind of more or less almost a finalized design in regards to that. Probably will have, probably looks like I will have our engineer as well as our planner and development officer and some administration people there to present those to council this coming Tuesday on the basis that we would like to get the final plan sort of approved. We'd like to get it out to tender here shortly and sort of get things going this summer is the plan. So as well with that, we have, because not once we get the final design done, the area is presently designated as transitional. So because that means almost, basic agricultural, it doesn't really specify if they want to do parks or anything else, we have to rezone. So that will be part of the process as well. So we will be calling it, it'll be called a special meeting on Monday just so we can get the first reading for that possible rezone scenario to get that going in conjunction with this finalized design, assuming that all comes into place. So so that it flows appropriately. Town app there, I just put in there that I did contact the SMB apps in terms of that. So basically, he did indicate that he would like to come and present to council a little bit of what their app can and can't do. As well, he said that they do website design hosting, and they're familiar with, there was talk about that bank table program. So he said he is, is aware of that and would like to present a proposal on what they could offer in terms of that. And the last one there, just the Middle Arc Estates. Part of the agreement there was a concrete block fence to be around that particular subdivision. Been kind of slow going, but recently between the developer and some people working on it, we're looking at getting a solution to get that up and going as well. So that's all I really have to say at this point.
Any questions?
Sorry,
Mr. Poultry?
you said a special meeting next week? On Tuesday?
Yes.
Sorry, I think you said Monday and then.
Oh,
Sorry.
see Tuesday.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay, Council Florence?
Thank you. I'm very curious about the concrete fence, if this is like a standard practice. Typically people plant like rows of trees, maybe a berm, or don't buy houses next to train tracks. So I was just wondering, is this like from the Alberta government, or is it without getting it up? Is it?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, basically this was part of the development agreement process, part of the talking with approvals to get the subdivision going, the CPR, that basically because of the proximity to the tracks, they had certain regulations that had to be met, of which one was to mitigate the sound, one was to prevent in case of a runaway locomotive or something, a possibility, and it was kind of looked at as, not to say a gated community, but to kind of encompass the community a little bit differently. So part of the negotiation process was that the developer was required to fence the scenario in that sense.
And just quickly though, that the gated community concept came from the developer.
Mhm.
They requested to be able to fence that.
The entire thing, okay.
Yeah.
And sorry, the requirement for the wall is from CP Real?
There was, it was appealed, the actual subdivision process, and as a result of the appeal, the decision came down from the appeal board that this fence was a requirement, a concrete block fence was a requirement in terms of a big, long 50-page CPR document or whatever you want to call it, this section of it, but it was part of the process.
And just a side thing, I've seen it in other subdivisions where they require this concrete fence. So we're not.
Yeah, and we, at that is not a decommissioned line
No,
over there. It's not currently not in use, but it's not decommissioned, and so that's why.
Right, but I
So they'll bring it back in maybe.
totally, yeah, thank you for clarifying. I just like on the other side, I mean, we have the berm, and so it's just that little bit more distance, then that would require that. It's different type of control, or. I was just curious about it, I was reading it and I was like, excuse me?
thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I mean, again, the berm and Sundance, part of that was a CPR requirement and to mitigate sound and whatever from the tracks and that type of stuff too. So it was a requirement that had to be put in as well in Sundance.
Thank you.
I have two questions for you. The first is regarding the wetlands. I know we've been talking about this final design for quite some time. I guess I'm just curious, why is it taking so long? I guess that's my question, because I know we talked about this months ago about them being kind of close to being done then. And so is there something that's happening that's just causing it to take longer?
Just engineering timetables and whatever in terms of putting together and then administration meetings back and forth a little bit for sure, but mostly just in time and various procedures in there. So.
Okay, thank you. This is my first time being involved in a project like this, so I don't know.
It's a big one.
I don't know. So just curious, I guess, from that perspective, but thank you for the clarification. The other question that I have regarding the town app, I think that we can absolutely have a presentation. I would like to see, because if they're the ones that are currently hosting the app, I would like them to present on the usage and the analytics for it, so that we can determine that. Is this the company that also does our website for us as well?
They don't do our website at the present time.
They don't currently. Who does the hosting and everything for the website?
Greg Ferries, I forget, he's not a
Okay.
company that's it's actually out of the States, his company now. But,
Okay, And he doesn't provide support at this point?
He does help us with stuff if we need behind the scenes and that type of stuff, and if we needed stuff to get on that is out of admin's
Okay,
capabilities. Just in talking with SMB apps, he indicated that a lot of the admin stuff, I mean, I'm not sure that they would put everything on there when we want changes or whatever, but he said we would take a lot of the administrative wear and tear out of it, maybe there, with whoever might be there now. So.
Mhm.
And they're a Lethbridge company, and
Yeah.
there, so.
yeah, I'd be curious to look into their solutions, but if they are the ones that are currently holding like the app that we're using, to see like just generally what our usage is to help better inform our decision.
And he said he'd definitely be willing to come and make a full-scale presentation. He's just at the FCM convention, I think, right now, so that's why he couldn't come right now. So probably be June before he could get here.
Yeah, that's fine. Great. Any other questions?
I have a question on the kind of the final design of the wetland. This would be, we talked about, yeah, just like final in the terms of grading and planting and pathways, or just grading and grass?
Madam Mayor, grading for sure, and some planting of vegetation, obviously. There would be out to the island, I guess we want to call it, bridge out to the island. There would also be, we talked about the relocation of the RV sewer dump as part of that process. And then we talked about a little bit of pathways, but not extensively, sort of on one side possibly. And some of those will be in the tender process. The way they're talking, looking now is there would be the base part to do, the operational part, like the final design, planting, and the operations, mechanics, hydraulics of the system. But then there would be the option, depending on the tender price, to do some trails, do some extra planting, to do different things like that. So depending on, like I say, the tender price that you get, may or may not get done this year. So.
I guess I'm just wondering if, we do have other ideas about this wetland, in terms of like sports courts or, there's a lot of ideas that we have thrown around in the concept level stage of that. I guess what I'm wondering is if, we're already out there with excavators and, planting grass or everything, it would likely save us some money in terms of, efficiencies. We did as much as we could fit into our whatever budget envelope is. Otherwise, we'll be going back later, and rejigging irrigation, redoing, tearing up facade, and so there's some remediation costs there. So I'm just wondering if we shouldn't look at some of those future things sooner than later, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Or does that delay things too much?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess you'll see, you saw the partial plan here a few weeks back or whatever there in terms of, so it hasn't changed drastically from there, but I guess part of the other reason for still working on it is we're also in consultation with an area structure plan for the property below that property, but the recently annexed portion of it. So we're looking at tie-ins for the road network and that type of stuff in conjunction with this as well. So there's a number of, obstacles, I guess if you want to call it. There also is the possibility, which, you've seen a little bit if you recall, towards the west of the actual pond, that there would be potential for a developable area of some sort, whether that be commercial, residential, combination of, or whatever you may want to see there. I did have a call from, about a year ago, we had a presentation from a reputable developer for a very nice kind of commercial, little bit of residential sort of area for there. And I talked to him twice in the last 2 days saying, with this dirt and stuff, where's things at? He just wants an update every once in a while. So the developer is still very interested in that if and when, it's determined as to whether you would want residential, commercial combination of, or what a planning council may want to do in terms of that. In terms of the other stuff that you mentioned, like soccer fields to, disc golf or whatever else you may want to put out there, another, our director of operations has said like maybe another social area type scenario down there as well, potentially. And there is the possibility on the other side of the big gas line that is kind of, in a sense, dead space to some degree, that we can't build over top, and even to build roads over it has to be reinforced to a massive degree, such as 45th was and stuff like that. So there's, planning to do with that. But again, to do that all in time that you get sort of, at least, what we're hoping to do is get a functional storm pond in operation by the end of this year. And, because that's pretty critical to our storm infrastructure in terms of some of our Sundance problems, which is another item that was in my report, and is, again, been a long-standing problem. We are getting closer to coming back to council with, here's a potential solution to it. Are you okay with that? And then working out, costs and all that type of stuff. There's still stuff to get worked on that as well. But even our so-called system with the Lafarge Pond and the Wiggins Slough in the county coming down 55th and all that, the way it presently operates, comes down 55th, gets into Lafarge, goes across to Wiggins in the county, then gets pumped out down 223 to 45th. And in the past, before we had our big outfall line to the river put in, which was done recently, you had to sort of coordinate pumping at different times. So by having this big holding tank, and part of the plan is obviously to have Lafarge with the ability to drain into the big pond. So we'll eliminate that, problem of that potential scenario. Also be able to hold water, so in the major storm events, the discharge and the release rates will be such that we won't have the problem of having to say Sundance, then Lafarge, then whatever the case is, other parts of town. So
Can I ask on that? Because the conversation was always from the beginning that we ensure that the stormwater that's going into that has been sort of at least naturally treated to some degree, or we can overwhelm that system because it is a naturalized stormwater, right?
Yeah.
Or so are we looking at having sort of like a swale effect coming from Wiggins Pond down to that? Sort of like a creek kind of effect?
yeah, it'd be an underground piping system.
I wonder, and I think if we were to talk to Michaela, the understanding, when we received the funding, we were looking at putting this project, and the understanding was, and that if we continued with our current stormwater practices and just piped everything in, that we would overwhelm that system with the amount of sort of debris in the water.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, but my understanding of the design of this pond, because it's kind of a beam thing in the way it works, and where they're actually having the water flow into the main constructed wetland from Lafarge, is such that there still would be a bit of a path for it to go through to remediate itself as it goes.
Okay.
Similar to water coming from Sundance and the rest of town, it will flow through, a pattern to basically get rid of some of the contaminants and that type of stuff prior to getting the outfall line to the river. So it's designed as a wetland, and it's not going to be just sort of raw stormwater flowing to the river at a rapid rate. There is a process as to how it gets there. So, but the capacity is such that it can hold a lot more and be discharged at off-peak times.
So in looking at other communities that have this, they do have swale systems set up. So it is sort of like a river with a lot of rock in it,
Right.
to catch a lot of the debris, right? To sort of clean it up a little bit before it goes into there. So I don't know how other communities are doing it, but I was a little excited at the prospect that that's something that we were looking at doing from Wiggins into that. Because not only does it create, so it cleans the water so that we can actually have a really well-functioning system, right? Like a swampland, a fully operational swampland that treats our water. But also, I think it would be a beautiful feature to have sort of trails along there for people to walk along that area, right? And you can do it in really, there's so many different models to look at from different communities, and it'll be much cheaper than putting a pipe underground. Like it would be, we would recognize cost savings as well, because anytime you throw a pipe into the ground, how many hundreds is it per square foot, right? Okay, and the other thing, I guess, I know that we want to get this in place, but there was always the thought that council was going to have sort of this conceptual overview of what it's going to look like and how it's going to fit into it, and it's like a sort of an area structure plan kind of an idea. And we haven't seen anything like that. All we saw was a rough draft that the engineers put together that included a parking lot with a sewage dump for RVs. And I mean, so it was a decision to throw an RV dump in there, and I'm not sure, I'm not comfortable at all with that. I thought we were gonna take a look at sort of area structure plans for that whole area and do a conceptual overview of how that's all gonna come together. Right, sorry, I'm just gonna keep bringing my concerns up, because the pathway, whenever we have our engineers design pathways, they are just, our engineers are great, meticulous, Cadillac kind of people, and we wind up with very expensive pathways. And so I think we need to really look at that and have that within our, sort of our area structure plan and a pathway around it. And it's going to be something that's not going to be the Cadillac. It can be a nice little Volkswagen pathway, right? So that we can fit it all the way around it instead of just part way around it. And I don't want to nitpick, and I'm not going to nitpick, but it feels like we're piecemealing this. And I believed that was going to come forward to council, that we were going to have a big, like an area structure plan to look at all of those things together.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, certainly, the planning for that is, for the whole area is on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
And certainly can be done, but I mean, to have it all planned out right now, to not get the working pond in conjunction right now is it's gonna take some time to see what you want and even look at, like, say, the plan for the development area, let alone any recreation or that type of stuff that you may want to see. And in terms of, the pipeline from Lafarge and that type of stuff, I mean, the engineers, if they're here Tuesday, it would be best to address how that works or doesn't work. They're aware of, obviously, the ACRP funding that we have for the wetland part of it, as well as the Building Canada money that we have for stormwater upgrades, which included the outfall line and possibly, moving down forth and ponds at the elementary, high school, and so on and so forth. So, and like I say, there's a fair bit of planning to do in terms of the area that is there on the other side of the pipeline to the potential area that is still undisturbed on the other, towards the 7th Street, I guess, if you want to call it in that sense, as to what you may want to see there. I mean, do you want residential? Do you want commercial? Do you want a combination of? Do you want it to be just, parks area, or, that, maybe institutional, public institutional? I mean, there's a number of things in that. So that's a process, and maybe even getting into a, public hearing process and all that type of stuff, which could take a while.
So I guess then, at this point, just from your conversation, it sounded as though they were moving forward with putting in the tenders to look at not only creating the naturalized stormwater pond, but also creating pathways and roadway access to our different development and all these different kinds of things. It sounds like it's more than just managing our stormwater. We're looking at piecemealing an area structure plan, right? Like little bits and pieces, and putting in a sewage dump. And those are little piecemealing of an area structure plan without the whole concept in front. So I recognize that we want to bring something on board to manage our stormwater, but I'm not sure how comfortable I am with us moving forward with things like pathways and sort of roadways to our across 45th there, and our parking lot and all those different. I'm not sure how comfortable I am with us moving forward with all those things then.
Yeah, as far as the roadways, it's just, at this point, would be conceptual, other than access to the RV sewer dump if it was potentially put in there. The other would be just, like I say, in the area structure planning with the people across the road, 45th. Obviously, where they were looking at some stuff may not line up with, say, 6th Street, for instance, which maybe is a logical place to have, an area to go across the 45th. There also is, do you, don't you extend Spruce Drive, which could, in a sense, come all the way out into this type of thing. And just so you're stacking distances and so other things like that. We don't want a whole lot of accesses onto 45th and even onto 223, with the other area as well. So it may seem piecemealing, as you're saying, Deputy Mayor Caldwell, but at the same time, to plan the whole thing, I mean, from even going beyond, I mean, if you go up to Lafarge, there still is potential at some point, which we have looked at before, industrial type lots up there, and or some other type lots as well. There's obviously widening of 223 from 45th to 51st, or 55th, which again involves some property owners there, which is part of the reason we didn't do it initially with
Yeah.
the, the main southeast access road period, so. And like I say, the other part of it is some of the grant funding is due for spending. We have requested an extension on the one and been granted that, to carry on with that, so, we kind of want to get some money spent on that, just on light of that. And like you say, it is, if our director of operations was here, he would say it is a piece that he would like to see in place to address his storm concerns, if and when we get the 1 in 100-year floods or a couple of back-to-back smaller type scenarios. So.
And I completely respect that, and I understand that.
But like I say, feel free when the engineer's here next week to
Perfect.
question away. I mean, hasn't gone out to tender yet, hasn't, if we have to delay it by another month or something, so be it. But like I say, that's the time to ask questions.
So we'll go Councillor Ackerman, and we'll go Councillor Florence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just a few thoughts on this. I'm with Councillor Poultry, and I think that we should be proactive in kind of planning, not just this next step, but what the end result's gonna look like, and then what Deputy Mayor Caldwell's kind of pointed out. To me, it almost feels like we're kind of being left out of the plan, and there's things happening where we don't really get to provide input. And I think that if we could have some of these conversations, with the people that are looking at that quarter section that we annexed, and if we are gonna talk to the engineers, then we can kind of make sure that everything's in alignment with what we're thinking for, instead of having them do a bunch of work and then say, hey, this doesn't jive with kind of our vision for the area. But speaking about the developer that was talking about that southwest section next to the wetlands, it's like, even if we could have them come in and present what they're thinking, even if that's not the way we want to go, at least we have an idea of what it could possibly look like, which might help inform our decision down the line, instead of waiting until we're 5-6 months down the road and then having this conversation and trying to figure it out, right? Because if we see something where like, hey, this doesn't work for us, or we don't want that, or this is a really good idea, there's a need for this, then it's better to know a little bit sooner. So I would almost like to see if we could get a little bit more information coming to the table for the grand scheme, I guess, aerial view of everything. Just make sure that everything's in alignment, so we're not going back and having to change work and losing a lot of time, especially if the grant money is kind of coming up to be spent, right?
Yeah, and, sorry.
Oh, thank you. Actually, thank you for bringing up those points, because I was actually under the impression that was more the way that you were stating as well. But so then I guess my question is with the way that it's going, then with it just being like, maybe like, I don't want to call it a portion of the area structure plan, but then what will happen to the public consultation part of it? If it's going to go to like request for bidders like coming up soon, then there won't be like the public hearing and the 3 readings as there would be for the area structure plan.
There would be, like, if the rezoning would require a public hearing.
Okay. Oh, right. The one is okay. Okay. So there will still be that opportunity for the public to speak to it.
Yeah, and so typically, for a public works facility, we don't have a lot of involvement. And so I understand this moving forward with this, but this is so much more at this time. It's sort of a merging of a beautiful parks and public space, as well as a public works facility, right? Which is why I understand wanting to bring the stormwater management piece on board. But when we start talking about, landscaping and trails, and because once we start doing that, then it starts to become how we create that park, or trail systems, what it builds into. And that's when we look at sort of that conceptual or structure plan to say, okay, what all do we have in place? And that would sort of inform a lot of those kinds of things. But are you saying that the money's running out as well for trails and landscaping and those kinds of things?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it's basically, we have X number of dollars from ACRP, we have X number of dollars from the Building Canada Fund.
Yeah.
Which, in light of the whole stormwater master plan, initially we were looking at a $14 million project, of which we don't have $14 million in funding in place. We've been able to save some dollars, as you saw with the digging of the pond to date. We've saved ourselves anywhere from $half to $1 million on that sort of thing. And then I guess, like I say, depending moving forward, that's where we determine where and how we go and how much further we go and how specialized we go. So, like I say, I mean, it's not that, anything's trying to be hit from council. It's just a matter of, the back and forth between the different groups, sort of the engineers, administration, or whatever. If you were involved in all those meetings, we'd be meeting a lot.
Yeah.
Because it's been a lot for a long time. Like I say, the area structure plan for the property south of 45th, email was recently as today that they want to get together again administratively to get something to obviously come to council, because that was the plan when we met from here about a month ago, roughly, or 6 weeks ago, with the intent of moving forward there. And obviously, like I say, with the intent of, kind of this partial finalized plan for a partial piece of that property that the town owns, of which the big part is going to be the wetland, we'd like to do, and then we can definitely start to look at the other stuff in terms of that. And as far as the walking trail, it's pretty minor, the little portion that we've had on there, because there was talk, like you say, basically all around the pound, up to Lafarge, up to 55th, perhaps connecting 45th, if the trail was brought from Sundance to 45th up to there, et cetera, et cetera. So, and again, it's dollars in terms of that plan too. We just spent 600,000 plus on the trail that we did last year.
Yeah. That's not sustainable, more transit.
In a sense. And moving forward, I mean, the plan to do all the walking trails that were even in the MVP is proposed, it would take a few years to do those on the basis of whatever fundings we get or whatever monies we can put in, so.
So might I suggest we're at 9:00, and we're just finishing up our bylaws and reports at this point, that if we're having the engineer come in next week, that we kind of put all our questions out there, and then see what we find out from that, and then figure out a way that we feel that we're able to have the input that we're desiring, and figure out the plan from that point forward. That works for everybody. Okay. So in keeping time, so that we don't run over today, I am going to ask that someone make a motion to accept the CEO report.
I'll make the motion. Okay. I move that the CAO's report is hereby accepted as presented.
Any other questions or comments? All right, all in favor? That's carried, thank you. So for our council member reports and questions, I'm going to ask, we'll go down the line really quick here, but if you just have a couple of things that you'd like to highlight, I don't think at this point in time you need to say every meeting that you were at, just if there's anything that's come up that you would like to share. We'll start with Deputy Mayor Caldwell.
So I was successful in my registration into the Alberta Municipalities course, and that is service delivery. I'm excited. One session, and I was emailing everybody madly, I think. So I look forward to continuing that. As well, I attended Green Acres Foundation and Working Culture, and we brought those conversations forward.
Thank you. Yeah. Councilor Pelletry, is there anything that you would like to share today?
From beyond my report that I
Yes.
sent out.
You can say no too.
No.
Okay. You're great at keeping time. We'll go to Councilor Florence.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I did not send out my report. I apologize about that. So I did the Emergency Advisory Committee, just told me not to do this, now I'm doing it, staff and volunteer, and then the Community Futures Board meeting as well. And it's just business as usual.
Councilor Acknowledgement, anything you'd like to highlight?
So I just had the Silk Road Exec board meeting and the quarterly board meeting, and we passed the plan for the upcoming year. One of the things on the plan that would be beneficial for towns, they're going to put together a list of resources for kind of kickstarting economic development in some of the communities that don't really have much on the go. So that's going to be something that's probably going to be coming out sometime this year. But I think that will be valuable. It'll be kind of, here's resources, here's how to utilize them. So it would be good for our community. So
Great.
I'll make sure that we're aware of that when that comes out.
Okay, thank you. For myself, I just wanted to highlight that I went to the Southern Alberta Library Conference on Friday. It was lovely. I really enjoyed being part of that board and see the unique things that they're doing. I was looking at, I think that it is I-9 that they have like these lockers that are set up where people can go and get books from it, and it's kind of this like automated thing. Super cool. And I was like, wow, we could potentially have something like that here until we have like an actual physical library. So I think there's lots of opportunities for us to look at in terms of how we can provide more library services here. One other thing I want to highlight from that as well is I actually had a chat with the Bookmobile people, and because I forgot that they come here. And so they're actually looking at doing some programming throughout the summer and just outside of the bookmobile. And so I had suggested that if they are looking at doing something like that here, that they connect with us so that we can, administration can help promote the different programs that they have happening. They're just in the midst of figuring out what that looks like, but I think that that'd be fantastic if we can help them with kind of promoting those different things. So that's what I've been up to. It was great. Okay, so we're gonna move on to correspondence. And I'm going to, again, in the interest of time, I'm going to ask for a motion to acknowledge the correspondence. Unless there's something that anyone would like to pull out and chat about specifically. If not, I'm going to call for the motion.
I'll make that motion. I move that the correspondence presented in this meeting is hereby acknowledged and filed.
Great. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to other business here. So we'll start out. We've got the first thing here. A volunteer recognition nomination is coming for Colleen Beck. And I'm going to turn this over to CAO Hoda. If there's anything that you think that we should know from this.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So actually it's for Stephanie Carson, but it's from nominated was Colleen Beck. But basically this is the policy that we currently have in place. There was talk, as you saw from the policy bylaw review minutes tonight, to maybe make it a once a year thing in conjunction with National Volunteer Week. At this point for this year, we haven't had a lot of these in the past, so we did put it out recently in a town news as well as on our social media sites. This was submitted to us. It is as per the policy which is attached up to council to determine if they feel it's a worthy recipient and to award it. Basically, it's a certificate published in the town, town news or recognized in some way. And then at this point, it doesn't even say it necessarily is presented at a council meeting, but that's one of the discussions moving forward with the policy. So definitely this individual is doing some volunteering from what I understand and see in the minutes and different things. So it's council's discretion as to accept it.
Thank you. All right, so would anyone like to make a motion to accept? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, no,
Or
no, you go ahead and make it, or someone can make a motion.
I can make that motion. Do we accept that nomination?
Great. And questions, comments, discussion? Councilor Florence?
I would actually, I guess I should have said this earlier. So I would actually, I would move that we refer to the next committee of the whole for further discussion on the nominee, or maybe funnel it through the appropriate committee. We clearly all know this individual, and as such, we are all biased. However, if we remove the name from this nomination form, I actually see an incomplete nomination form, and I think we owe it to this long-standing volunteer more than multiple years on many organizations. I really believe in giving credit where credit is due, and I would like to get further information from the nominator or further discussion at a committee of the whole about that volunteer involvement. So, but I mean, and I say that, the nominator is a friend of mine as well, but I just, again, like multiple years on many organizations, like, what are those organizations? How many years? Tell us about it, so we can talk about it to the town, right? And so we can further highlight that. That would be my thought.
Right. Other thoughts?
What is the recognition look like? That's my question. Is it just a piece of paper?
Certificate.
Piece of paper?
Yeah. Other.
I guess when I was reading that this person's involved with volunteering with soccer, with the schools, with Parks and Rec, with the rec and culture, as well as running different types of activities for families in the community. I mean, this is a kind of leadership that we want to encourage. I don't know, do we want to make the nomination process really onerous? Like, I guess that's kind of my concern. Like, I'm comfortable with my motion and I'm comfortable moving forward with it. And then if we have some concerns with how our nomination forms are, maybe we look at changing that so that we can request more information. Just wanting to be aware that this is really a part about growing our volunteers in our community and growing those volunteer organizations. And do we want to make it be a simple process, or do we want to make it not?
I guess if it came to council and there wasn't a name on this, would we give that a word? Like, if there was no name and you read school society, arts and culture, parks and rec, like, I mean, I get it, and I'm aware of her commitments, and I agree with you, but I just, again, I'm like, I would hope that there would be a little bit more information.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And you're right, and I think you're probably right. If it was a name that I didn't recognize and didn't know the different volunteer commitments this individual is involved with, you're probably right. So we're going to have to look at revising the form so that we can say, can you please give very specific volunteer, which different organizations? But I do know that CKSA, I know that it's schools, I know that it's Parks and Rec, I know that it's Rec and Culture, I know that I think the upcoming event this weekend, I think this person is volunteering to run that event, our
Spring Crest, so,
spring craft sale.
yeah, she is.
And you're absolutely right. And I think that's one of the gifts and one of the challenges of a small town, is that when you have that big, strong community leader that's involved in so many different things, that name recognition that says, oh, I remember they do this and they do that thing and they do this thing. We wouldn't get that in a larger center, we would have to get it on paper. But in a little town, I think we tend to all know who those leaders are.
I do these, we do this type of stuff at work all the time with, like, we've got our alumni achievement awards. And I can say that I found that it's a growing process as you learn what you need to fix each year as you kind of go through it. I completely understand what you're saying. I think that there could have been a lot more information included in here, but I kind of wonder if part of that, only part of it is based on the program and not necessarily on the person. Do you know what I'm saying? I think that maybe our form and maybe our way of doing this wasn't set out great, but also, like, I understand what you're saying when you read how many years in volunteer with your organization, multiple years on many organizations. But I guess that my thought is that should we penalize the person for that, or is it the process that we learn and then we fix for next time?
Right, yeah, no, totally, thank you for bringing that up. So I don't recognize her, and not at all, I would love to see this go to her, but I would like to see more information. If we're gonna do a write-up and put it in the town news, I would like to see more information. That's it. I think that actually, though, in the future, if we're talking about making changes, if things like this actually could be funneled through the appropriate committee, then that committee can make a recommendation on it. I think that would actually be a better process.
Which committee would this go to?
I think it would either be the appreciation committee or the rec and culture committee.
Okay.
But just again with the breaking down and having these conversations, like, do we have the information, right? And then, you know, that can go up further. And then even with our, you know, we've had conversations about formalizing our request for decisions and again, going through that process. I do tend to get a little caught up in processes, and so I appreciate what you're saying. But I did want to share those thoughts on this because, again, I think it's important to give credit where credit is due.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and one thing we talked about at the event was actually, you know, what kind of things are we presenting at this event? And so I think this is one, I think, a great example of somebody who should be recognized at this type of event, right? So.
We have so many people that we need to be doing this with. Like the fact that this, you know, that we haven't seen one of these for a long time, like, do we need to get it out more? Like, I think we need to make it a little more user-friendly and make it, more pointed questions to tease out that information. But we need to get more groups in there.
But I will go back and say that this is a program that needs somebody needs a staff member to own it to fully
Absolutely.
endorse it.
Absolutely.
And without that, it'd be flaggers, right?
Yeah. Can I actually speak to that?
Yeah.
When I worked at the town, I was always told that, in fact, this is not like a staff policy, it's very much a council policy. And so, like, if it wouldn't actually be in this sense as it is, that it wouldn't actually be like a staff doing it, it would still just come to council. And so if we are gonna change it, then we'd have to change that too, right? And so.
Yeah, and see, I very much see this, again, as something where administration would look at the program as a whole, the council would do the selection based off of a rubric or whatever. And so that's where the distinction lies for me. I think at this point, I kind of wonder, Councilor Ackers, did you have your hand up?
No,
Okay. Okay, I'll just finish the thought and then we'll go to you, sorry. I just kind of wonder if at this point in time, what you're saying, I think, is like that we do need, I'm kind of flipping back and forth here and saying that, like, we want to recognize people that we want to recognize for credit, like give credit where credit is due, because this is the information that we use to then do our write-up, et cetera. So I'm kind of wondering if we go back to this nominator and ask for it to be filled out a little bit more so, knowing that we want to go down this path, or do we just award it as is, I suppose. But those are the two things that I'm trying to balance in my mind. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think this volunteer does a great thing for our community, and I think that she should be recognized for her efforts. My personal thoughts are the form as written is kind of filled out. Maybe it could have used a little bit more information, but there's nobody who can kind of quantify that information on the form. So I'm almost thinking if maybe we just kind of move this one forward, say, yes, we'll recognize you, but then we look at the process around the road and add that rubric and, try to formalize the process a little bit more. So it's a little less, I guess, opinions of people, and it's more kind of structured.
That was all like 2 weeks ago and didn't make no changes.
That is true.
And so, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, but literally just looked at it.
But I wonder though, as like more information comes to light, things kind of change, right? And when you actually see how it's coming in, like in my mind, this can't be a program that's owned by council. I think that it is endorsed and it is selected by council, but this is one piece of that entire volunteer program that we're talking about. So I think it needs a complete revamp.
I would agree.
But I guess that as I hear all the different things, my thought on this right now is that we approve it, knowing that we will probably have to go to the nominator and the nominee saying, we need to know more about this area, about which organizations exactly, because that will then have to be used for the community leaders program, if you're doing something there, or it needs to go onto social media, or it needs to go wherever it needs to go, so that it can be properly done. But I kind of have this feeling right now that I don't know if we can really penalize the person because we don't have our program and our stuff kind of in place as best as we could, as I guess Brian put it this way.
Well, we're not penalizing them because it's not like they tried to get something and didn't get them, but I can appreciate what you're saying.
Maybe that's not the best choice of word, but basically, like I feel like this is kind of on us a little bit more so than it is on them, I guess. The program is not as strong as it could be to support it.
Yeah, and
Thank you. So I'm going to, is there any more discussion on this, and then we can do a vote on this? More discussion? Okay, I'm gonna call the question. All in favor? Great. Opposed? Great. That is carried. Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to the next part here. Alberta municipalities input needed for the proposal for allocation for the LGFF. I'm gonna turn that over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I guess as indicated in there, they're looking at changing the MSI funding to an LGAF program. And so with that, at the Municipal Leaders Caucus, there was a proposal presented forward, and now Alberta Municipalities is hosting a virtual engagement to basically get some input in terms of how to approach the government as to how to proceed with that new funding proposal prior to getting it all finalized. And so looking at a May 17th date for an hour and a half to provide some input on that.
And so this is looking for council members to attend this? Okay.
Yeah, members, so
May 17th.
Alberta Municipalities members, so both rural and urban are being invited, so.
What time is that again?
3 to 4.
3 to 4:30. I would. Who would like to attend? What's wrong with that?
So Alberta Municipalities is looking at putting together a statement, right?
They presented a proposal at the mayor's caucus in March.
Okay.
So is there anyone from council that would like to attend this? Council Florence?
yes, good.
Great. Anyone else?
I'll ask to attend, please.
Great, and I will as well, so I can make that motion. I move that myself, Deputy Mayor Caldwell and Councillor Florence are hereby authorized to attend a virtual engagement session regarding Alberta municipalities' proposal for allocation of the LGFF on May 17th, 2022. Pardon me?
Making it go all over while you're.
Oh, no, that's okay. We're good. And we just have to add Councillor Florence. Perfect. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, the next thing that we have on here is Alberta Municipalities EOEP, Land Use Planning and Development Approvals. Is anyone interested in attending this course?
I actually am available, or I want to take it, and I am available for like 10 minutes of one session, so I would very much like to take it.
Is there anyone else?
It's a really good course.
This
I've
isn't
taken
the
it in the
one.
past.
This isn't the one you're doing right now, though.
No,
No, okay.
I've taken this one in the
Yeah.
past, so I'm sure it's probably updated, but it's a great course.
Awesome.
I can make this motion. I move that Councillor Florence is hereby authorized to attend the virtual course regarding the elected officials education program, land use planning and development approvals beginning May 12th, 2022. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Okay, and we'll move on now to the Town of Taber registration open for the Alberta Japan Twin Municipalities Conference. See how to, I don't know, is this something that we've done before or is this new?
This is new as far as I'm concerned. I haven't heard or haven't received an invitation for us to attend this in the past. I wasn't even aware that actually Tabor was twinned with a Japanese city. I know the county was at one point because they had representatives from Japan sort of back and forth, had a city that they were dealing with. But. So this is new as far as I'm concerned, the first time that I've seen it. So.
All right. Is anyone interested in attending this? If not, great, thank you for the information.
Can I just,
Okay.
can I just add that this is what we're gonna be tied up for our strategic planning?
Oh, it is too.
But I was gonna say, we did have a system like this in my hometown, and it was
Yeah.
very beneficial because it brought a lot of culture to your community, and it
Yeah.
also lets you show off what you have. So it's like, I don't know, I wouldn't mind looking into this down the road to see if there's any possibility of that. I think this year might be a little bit too short a notice.
I'd like to add, I mean, just looking at our census statistics from 2017, we have 40 Japanese people who identify as Japanese, so.
Like a super cool program. I just thought it was interesting that they're inviting other municipalities to come to this. I thought it would have been more of a community type of thing, but then again, like I don't really know anything about these programs, so,
And sorry, Japanese is the largest physical minority we have.
okay.
Oh, in Coopers?
Yeah.
Well, that's very cool.
Well, as of 2017, so that's 40 Japanese and 40 Latin Americans, so I guess it's tied, but.
All right. Well, it seems like a cool program and a great conference. I hope that they have fun. Okay, now we're going to talk about the TNC Publishing Group regarding the Town of Culver's business and community profile publication. Sia, I know that you had put a memo for us regarding this as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, yeah, I mean, this is the basic brochure that was done previously. So I can pass it around if you want to have a look at it. But, and as indicated in there, they put it on. It doesn't cost the town anything because they get supposedly enough ads to do it. They put out, I think, about 500 copies roughly. They've gone to different tourist information centers, whether it's Pincher Creek, to the area, Coldale, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, left a few here as well. However, I know the ones they've left here, we haven't really distributed very many, partly because, you know, unless you're hosting some kind of conference or putting together a welcome wagon package, that type of stuff, which used to happen, you know, there's not a lot of, maybe when people sign up for water service or something to that effect, but, so at this point, I guess as the mayor, I don't feel that there is a need to do it at this point, but I mean, obviously, if council chose, as indicated, we just provide some, you know, message from the mayor, community information, tax utility information, recreation, events organizations, et cetera. On the basis of other promotional scenarios, I just think it was something needed right now, but again, it's council's discretion.
Great, thank you. Councilor Friends.
Thank you. I got quite a few thoughts on this, so I'll try to make sure I get all my points, but I do feel that this would be, that if we were gonna look at doing this, this would be the time to do it. We're gonna have a strategic plan that has a lot of community engagement. We also have recent additions to recreation in the town with the pathways, the spray park, and the disc golf that's coming to town. I do believe it is a chance to show off the town, put the town on the map. I know that they're talking about a lot of print media, but even if we could get like a PDF or something that we'd be able to distribute electronically, I could see a benefit to that. Personally, I would love to see something like this happen, but I would say almost maybe after we get a strategic plan in place, so then we can kind of focus on some of that. We do have a fresh new council, and I do think it would be good to have that fresh new image of town. Also looking at the demographic change since 2015 until now, there is a big shift to younger families, so we could really showcase that. I've talked to a few people about this, and kind of the thoughts are, what sells a community if somebody wants to settle in a community, right? So if we have an outdated brochure, that doesn't talk about things that are going on, I don't think that that's necessarily a great positive. But if we have something that's a little more current that can show, the sense of community pride and what we have to offer, I think that would be a benefit.
So I guess a couple of questions for clarification on this for me. So it's sounding like these are primarily going to tourist information centers, and then a couple, like some come here.
They leave some here for sure.
And if this is something that we chose, because when is the deadline for this?
I don't think there's any real particular deadline.
Okay. And then my other question, I guess, is if we didn't do it this year, they wouldn't be like, we're never doing this again.
No, they've been around, maybe not every year, it's been it says since 2015 that we did this one, but they've been around in between that time to look at it, but at the time, COVID and different things hit, and they didn't do as much, so.
My thought is like, I completely understand and agree where you're coming from. I'm not sure that with a tourist information center that this publication makes sense there. I think that this makes sense if someone's looking for a community potentially to move to or to start a business in, but I find that a little bit odd. I also wonder too, just in looking at this, is if we are doing more of our like updated planning and things like that, if we were to do this, we would definitely, I think, we would want to wait until after that, because even though this is it's a smaller publication, there still is quite a bit of content that we do need to provide for this. And I think it needs to be written in such a way that's reflective, I guess, of the brand and the town itself. So that's, I guess, my hesitation at this point is that who's reading this? I guess at the end of the day, like who is actually taking this thing and looking at it? If we're not using it like solely for like that economic development purpose or that, something like that, tourist information center just doesn't make sense to me for this.
Just a thought, like even with the visitor information centers, it's like maybe we don't target that, maybe we try and see if we can leave some of the gas stations, so you might get people that are passing through, and then they might be able to see what the town has to offer. Right? There's probably different sources. Some of the people I talked to said they left them with realtors or like in medical offices, the doctor's office too, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes people are coming in from another community and they might see them. So it's just kind of depending on where you want to put them. I think I like the message more than the delivery necessarily, right? I do think it's important to have that piece of material that you can use to promote your town and to try and stand out a little bit. It's just how you deliver that message, whether it's through a publication like this or if it's just through maybe a PDF that kind of has like what do we have to offer. I think that it's good to get the message out there.
I wonder if we couldn't take this sort of idea or the similar template and update it and get it on our website, get it on our different social media platforms, but also explore different places where we can deposit this information, right? And I mean, that's a much greater audience. But as RK had recommended and stated that we do have a strong sort of a website and social media presence now that this may not be. Mm-hmm. And how many did they say that we would get of these? Was it 500?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think they produced roughly 500.
Yeah, they roughly 500.
A little bit on how many we were left here with, but.
Yeah.
couple hundred or more, probably at least.
Okay.
And I guess at the end of the day, like, this is 500 of these pieces that they're doing essentially for free, which is like, you know, when you look at that, that probably costs a couple bucks to print, so that's $1,000 or so, right, in terms of that. So I think that I think the tool is great that they do that, but unless we have a strategy as to what's going to happen with the tool, it's really useless. And so I think that, is there a way that we could, like, I guess that I'm saying right now, I don't think that we do this, but we keep this as an option that as we move more to the future, and we say like, this could be a potential strategy that we use for economic development or attracting whatever here, that we look at this again. But in my mind, in the current context, it doesn't make sense.
I noticed there's a more current one on our website than what's been added to our agenda. It's a different version, maybe, I don't know, it looks to be newer.
Is that the same one though? Or is that just something else?
It's got the same business and community profile.
Mm-hmm.
There was one that was done by Southgrow that was a few years back too, so that may be the Southgrow.
Message from there. It's got a lot of the same content. Maybe it is from something. I mean, this is the one that comes up on Google when I searched for it.
Yeah.
So if I was going to look for a business profile for the community, this is the one I would see.
So if you're looking under community profile, what population are you seeing? Should be the top line there.
2668. So it's the 2016 information is what it's saying.
Yeah, this was 2015. So 2016 came from Southgrow. Now see, that would be really nice if some way we can get Southgrow to keep that updated. I wonder what that might look like if that's something that they offer to municipalities. Was that just a one-off deal? They got some funding to create community profiles?
I think back in the day it was that they had an individual and some funding and they created or did this for all the communities under their jurisdiction.
But it's not to say that we couldn't take that content in there and update it, right? And like, if we think that that's valuable, because this one looks more valuable than the older one, that could happen.
Well, it reaches a far greater audience, right, having it as a digital. And I know that Councillor Ackerman was, as our Southgrow rep, you had your hand in the air there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's not on the operational plan for the year for anything kind of like this, but we could definitely talk to them maybe and see if we can get the files so we could do an update on our own. And just save some of that work.
It'd be an amazing student project. Is Southgrow thinking of bringing students on? An internship?
We'll have a letter.
So I guess I'm gonna ask, so it's been recommended by administration that we don't pursue this at this point in time. Had some discussion, so I guess I'm curious as council, what do we want to do with this right now?
I accept the recommendation of the CAO.
I think it's good to wait until we have a formal plan.
Great. Perfect, thank you. All right, let's look at the train and trailer regarding the rental agreement, and see how to turn this over to you now.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So again, as indicated in the little memo there, with the dissolution of the Miners Days Committee, as we've talked about, I think previously, all the assets that they had were given back to the town to be, in a sense, provided to nonprofits operating within our jurisdiction. I think when we had our discussion at the council table, it was such that, somehow we would funnel, there were some dollars, we would funnel those sort of towards some recreational type activities. The train is one of the assets that did come over in that presently is in the town hands, I guess, and is presently insured with the town. I know it was utilized at Party in the Park last summer. I understand there was a few mechanical issues, which, I don't think are insurmountable, but would need to be addressed prior to. But in looking at, previous Miners Day scenario, they did have a rental agreement for this asset, of which we put the copy in there for that. We've been approached again, as indicated by the Lethbridge Air Show, to utilize it, and apparently they have utilized it from Miners Days in the past as well. So, and again, I'm sure that coming up with Miners Days or whatever it'll be called at the end of August, I'm sure that you have to be looking for this possible usage again. Like I say, the asset part of it is still with the town, but potentially, as indicated, where, nonprofits are supposed to have it. So I guess it's just a matter of, do we want to look at providing it or not? If we do, similar agreement type thing.
So, myself, when I look at this, from my understanding, when Miners Day Society dissolved, the assets came to the town to be dispersed. And so I guess that I have a little bit of an issue with this in a sense that I don't think that we have the right to do this. Because technically, we're the holders of it until it goes to somewhere. And so I don't know if we want to take on the responsibility of renting or doing something with it just because we have it in our possession. I guess is the way that I kind of look at that, because it's technically not the town's either. It's just kind of in trust.
Yeah, I guess like I say, that's what I came forward to council and we talked about from the dollars, which are in a separate account in the town's, I guess, bank account right now. This as well. I know there are a few other items probably in the hall. I mean, they're smaller, but whether it's roasters and that type of stuff, or Miners Days type stuff, and certainly if we want to gift or do this to Parks and Rec or whatever we feel is a suitable scenario and let them deal with it, that's fine on the basis of the way it was given to us that we're supposed to do that. So.
Can I ask, was the terms of reference not that this was supposed to be forth to a charitable?
A nonprofit.
Is it nonprofit or is it
Nonprofit.
charitable?
It's a non-for-profit in the actual dissolution.
I thought our conversation before was an organization with charitable status, which would present a little bit of a challenge for us. But if it's not for profit, that opens up the door for us, right?
Yeah, this was taken, the way I worded it was exactly on the notice of dissolution or whatever that was in their bylaws or constitution. So,
And so, so we hold this in trust, and then I guess we disperse all of this to a not-for-profit organization that does the same kinds of services and activities.
yeah, I guess it says not-for-profits operating in our jurisdiction limits.
Councilor Florence?
I wanted to say I appreciate how the recommendation is being presented and how it's written. I also wanted to say that I would have been happy to point you to a current form, not one from 2016, 2017. But I again want to mention that maybe that this should go through the Rec and Culture Committee to hash out the details and to see if it's even feasible. Nonetheless, I'm going to go ahead with my thoughts. The mechanical issues of the train are so bad that the train hasn't even been used in the parade in recent years for the fear of it being overheating. It's a 1970s lawnmower tractor. When we talk about other tractors and how much they cost, if it breaks, it will not be replaced at its current value, not even close. So it's going to be an investment to replace it. So is it worth it to forward it out for a Lethbridge event that's going to see thousands of people in 30-degree heat and risk not being able to use it for our future events? And so for me, it's a no.
I completely, I like that approach, Councilor Florence. In speaking with Brad Hurston, who was a mechanic, he thought that it was repairable fairly simply, just with some work. But I don't know if that would be enough time for this is.
I'm not talking about any repairs that happened. I don't want to get into the weeds of that. I'm talking about the age of the actual machine and the state of just oldness it's in.
Yeah, but we have old vehicles
Totally, and
that can run long times, right?
right, and that's a decision that I guess we have to make.
But I think there's value to what you said. Probably when it's used at an air show, the use would be far exceed any of the use that we use in this community with our population. right? And when you talk about the heat, I mean, that is a really valued, really treasured icon at our little community events for all the kids. And the lineups are really long to ride on that little train. I think we have to hang on to it as hard as we can, as long as we can. And it might be not renting it out to a large event. You know, that might be wise.
I mean, I guess like we run it nonstop at Party in the Park, right? From whatever that started to whenever that ended. And if their show is a similar duration, it's really not exceeding the use that we would put on it. Right? But
I'm just thinking in terms of hours, like the air show goes on over the course of a couple of days.
well, that's true.
And it's on that hot tarmac.
Yeah.
I've only ever been
That is-
to
that is like-
for 2 hours maybe maximum, right?
Okay, I didn't know that. It was, yeah.
And we get nothing out of it, like what's a couple $100, like,
Yeah. that's
nothing
true.
really.
Well, you know, I mean, there's a neighborly aspect that we have to weigh in, and which, there's some value to that, but I think that when we look at the use outweighs the value, right?
I would agree, like maybe at this point, this is going to become a stationary art project. Where it just sits there and is a display or something.
It's gonna climb on it, maybe we can put some pedals on it and make it all right.
Counteract things.
Yeah, kind of like you mentioned, Mayor Monty, that, you know, if it's held in trust right now, I don't think it's really for us to rent out at this time. I think we would have to get it to a not-for-profit before that, and then maybe forward the application. So, I mean, right now, I would say no, and then with the concerns with, you know, having it used in town versus used externally, that is a valid concern with the age of it, so.
That's it's on there.
Is it?
Yeah.
Because I was just wanting to, I was just trying to get down there to see,
It is.
well, I just want to see who else was in the community.
Okay.
But Councillor Florence, do you happen to have, as like a previous Miners Day person, like the bylaws, so we can see how that's written?
Or not in front of you.
But does,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you do have a
Yeah.
copy of them?
Yeah.
Because I think that that's where I'm getting hung up. Are we looking for, is it a registered charity? Is it a society? Like, what is it? Does it, no, but like, who are they giving the?
Like, I don't know off the top of my head.
It's
I'd have to dive into
it's
the
a
bylaws.
non-for-profit, and administration had provided a list previously of all the
Okay.
non-profits in the town, except Parks and Recs was on that because there's administrative error at the government level, where they thought we misfiled our things, but they actually didn't, so they reinstated us. It just wasn't during that month that CNO how to pull the records, and if you pull the records now, Parks and Rec Society is registered as a non-profit. So,
But it's registered as a society, right? And that's where I think we need the clarification as to like who, because we do need to figure out what to do with these assets at the end of the day.
We do.
But I think that's a larger conversation. So as per right now, what I'm hearing from everybody is,
but a society, yeah, society is just a name, but there's only two statuses, it's non-for-profit or charity. Those are the two. There's not
Yes.
another third one, society, it's non-for-profit or
Yeah.
charity.
Yeah.
So there's only
Okay.
two
And it's
choices.
not,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not true.
And so, yeah, I think that conversation's gotta come up at a very soon committee of the whole. But yeah, I think what you're hearing this time from us is that at this point, we don't consider it to be in sufficient repair to rent out. A, B, we are in fact, as a town, we're holding in trust for a not-for-profit organization.
That's right.
And as such, I don't think we have the legal right to rent it.
Council Barnes?
I was just gonna say too, with the assets and other things, again, if that could go like through that committee of the whole, or through that committee to discuss it, and to see what to do with it, right? Or to keep it in trust. And that is one of the things I would like to point out is that, coming to your rec and culture meeting that I was hoping to just show anyway, so.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
There's other stuff too that's not belonging to minor states that belongs to the town that rec and culture could access, that probably they aren't aware of, so it'd be good to have access to that.
I believe that the chair will send you the agenda for next week. I think it's next week.
Please send it as soon as possible.
Yes, I asked her to do that, so.
Thank you.
Okay, so basically we're saying we don't want to do this. Do we need a motion for that if, based on just the discussion of, at this point in time, we just,
I mean, you could make the motion and defeat it.
I think we're just gonna say we're good.
Yeah, I'm just informed, I guess, the original people that have approached this, that at this point, it's not in a rentable state.
Well, I think it would be a liability, like honestly for us too, like what if that thing explodes? Like it could happen, I don't know.
Well, that's what I put, I mean, as indicated, I mean, provided it can be put into a reasonable state of repair.
Yeah.
How much that is, I don't know.
Counselor,
To possibly extend this before we go into closed session, just so we don't have to leave closed session, if you want to extend it and then go back in.
yes, we will do that. So would you like to do that?
Yeah, sure, I'll make the motion to extend the council meeting an additional 30 minutes if required.
All right, any session? All in favor? Okay, that's carried, thank you. And then can I get a motion to go into closed session? You can, oh, perfect, thank you.
I move that council close the meeting to the public for agenda item 9G, Colors Pathways, Scope Change Number 1, as per section 16 of the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act, and agenda item 9H, administrative position, job description, and salary, as per section 17 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act.
Great, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? That is carried.